Chapter 2208. The nobles were still talking about the scene where Princess Angelique made a scene at the banquet. After knowing that the strange thief was the princess in disguise, the original anger had turned into a desire for more. This group of nobles was probably idle. Let's talk about the relationship between Prince Desolate and Prince Cicero. Medanzo sat on a chair outside the crowd and ate. Babalia, on the other hand, waited on him carefully. Usually, this kind of obviously contradictory question should be easy to correct the distorted part of Babalia's cognition. But at this moment, Babalia didn't seem to care about this at all. His young master was a real count. How could he not know about the relationship between Prince Desolate and Prince Cicero? Young master, Prince Desolate's birth mother is His Highness the Prince's biological sister. Babalia said carefully, "Actually, this isn't a secret. After all, His Highness has a very obvious inheritance. That head of silver hair is the symbol of the Radiant Moon clan." Medanzo pondered for a while. What's the relationship between the emperor and the prince? She remembered that in the world of Azi, Dr. Cicero appeared as the brother of the president of that world. She actually began to feel a little confused about the relationship between this big family. Of course, His Highness the Prince is His Majesty's biological brother. Babalia opened his mouth and seemed to be surprised by this question. Huh. Medanzo frowned. Then Prince Desolate's background, isn't it? Babalia nodded and lowered his voice. Although the nobles don't care too much about this, it's not something to be publicized. Although Prince Desolate's matter is widely spread among the nobles, it's forbidden to disclose it to people outside the nobles. Moreover, although Prince Desolate has the identity of a prince, it's only a private title among the nobles. Although he also has part of the inheritance rights, strictly speaking, Prince Desolate's identity isn't recorded in the royal family's records. Why doesn't Princess Angelique have the silver hair that the Radiant Moon clan has? Medanzo asked curiously, isn't His Majesty and Prince Cicero's biological brother? His Majesty is not the Radiant Moon, but the glorious sun. Babalia thought for a moment and said, legend has it that countless radiant moons can give birth to a brilliant sun. Emperor Califar was one such example. That was why he was able to become the founder and end the mythical war. How many children does the emperor have? Medanzo suddenly asked. One is the first Princess Angelique, and the other is Prince Desolation. Babalia said, in addition to these two who often appear in the public eye, there is also a more mysterious empress and the crown prince. Two more, and one of them is the crown prince. Medanzo was deep in thought. Why did the princess say that he was mysterious? And the crown prince, why didn't he appear tonight? The reason why the other princess is so mysterious is because we only know that she exists, but have never seen her. As for the crown prince's words, Babalia looked around nervously and then whispered into Medanzo's ear, young master, did you forget? The crown prince is rumored to have disappeared. Disappeared? When? I don't know the details. Babalia shook his head. It was probably 3 years ago. Currently, the world government is actually under the joint management of the prince and the first princess, Angelique. The first princess's ambition is not small, but the attitude of the royal family is not something that we can guess. But what? Babalia gritted his teeth and said, but I heard that the crown prince is not His Majesty's child. He might be another, brilliant son that was born naturally. Of course, this is just a rumor. No one has confirmed it, and no one dares to confirm it. Medanzo was about to say something, but her eyes became calm and she lowered her head to eat, because a man with long silver hair was walking over. Prince Cicero, this man with absolute authority among the nobles, actually came. Babalia suddenly became nervous. No pure-blood noble could remain calm in front of a prince, let alone a noble like him. Pure-blood nobles had absolute privileges in the world, But this prince was the man who stood at the peak of these privileges. He was the head of the Radiant Moon family, the most respected man under the emperor. "Greetings, your highness." Babalia took a deep breath and bowed. "I remember your name. I think it's Babalia." Prince Cicero smiled. "I saw your competition that year, and it left quite an impression on me. Your swordsmanship is not bad, and you almost became the champion of that year." Babalia was a bit excited. "To be praised by your highness is the greatest honor in my life." "The greatest honor in your life should come from His Majesty's praise, not mine." Prince Cicero waved his hand casually. He glanced at the young boy who was eating at the table and asked indifferently, "Where's your master?" "I heard he left with the princess." "Is that true?" Babalia subconsciously glanced at young Master Metatro, who was beside him, and gave him a signal with his eyes. Unfortunately, young Master Metatro acted as if he didn't see it and continued eating with a silly smile. Babalia was very anxious, but he didn't dare to neglect this prince. He could only bite the bullet and say, "Yes, my earl and the princess left for quite some time." "Do you know what happened?" Prince Cicero asked again. Babalia said, "It seems that the princess is interested in how the earl found the fantasy circus, so she invited him to tell her about it." "Fantasy circus?" Prince Cicero thought for a bit. "Your highness, is there a problem?" Babalia asked nervously. Prince Cicero shook his head. "No, it's just that I've heard of this mysterious circus whose whereabouts are uncertain. I'm just a little interested. Since she has been taken away by the Empress, then forget it. Oh, right, go back and tell your count that I quite like the gifts he sent." How thoughtful of him. Babalia was overjoyed. "If your highness likes them, the earl will definitely be very excited." "Don't get excited too early." Prince Cicero chuckled. "I still have things to do. Go ahead." At this moment, the idiot Medanzo suddenly walked over and pulled the prince's pants. She looked up and said innocently, "Uncle, can you play a game with me?" Babalia was shocked. His mind went blank and he almost fainted. His legs were soft. The people around all looked over, but they didn't know which noble's child this was. How could the prince be so rude? Unexpectedly, the prince seemed to find it interesting. He rubbed the young man's head and asked curiously, "What game do you want to play?" "How about hide and seek?" "Okay." Prince Cicero smiled and said, "Then you have to go and hide well." Metatro shook his head and said, "That's not it. You go and hide and then I'll catch you. I'm good at catching people. You have to hide well." "I'll hide?" Prince Cicero blinked in surprise. "Can't I?" Medanzo looked pitiful. Prince Cicero shook his head. "You can." "Okay, I'll go and hide. You can catch me." Everyone was surprised. His Highness seemed to be easy to talk to this night. Medanzo said again, "Uncle, if I go and catch you, what if they don't let me enter some places? Then I'll never be able to find you? That's not fair." "Then what do you want?" The smile on Prince Cicero's face deepened. "I want to catch you. You can't stop me from catching you. That's fair." Prince Cicero suddenly patted Medanzo's shoulder. At the last pat, his hand was still on Medanzo's shoulder. He said loudly, "Everyone listen up. I'm going to play a game with this little kid. From now on, no one is allowed to stop this little kid for any reason. Do you hear me?" Unbelievable. Prince Cicero was so easy to talk to. Could this little kid be the prince's illegitimate son? Prince Cicero held Medanzo's hand and came under a big tree in the courtyard. He let Medanzo start counting down. "You count to 50 and then start catching me." The prince whispered to Medanzo, "Of course, I'll hide normally. I've already agreed to your request. You have to use normal methods to catch me. Don't think about cheating." He patted Medanzo's shoulder and then slowly walked away. Under the big tree, Medanzo's expression was as if she had seen a ghost. Her power wasn't restricted when she came to the page world, but now it had completely disappeared. "What? You still don't want to start counting?" Prince Cicero's voice came from the crowd again. Madanzo's expression froze. She could only slowly turn around and cover her eyes. She braced herself and said, 1, 2, 3. In the room, bright red wine began to spread and flow from the broken glass. Princess Angelique slowly sighed. She looked at the Qingtian doll's head in front of her expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Forget what you just saw." The Qingtian doll's head nodded. "Your Highness, don't worry. Leader told me to forget everything after tonight." Princess Angelique frowned. She quickly walked back to the recliner and sat down. She crossed her legs and put her hands down naturally. She said coldly, "Leader? Your leader, what else did he say?" The Qingtian doll's head said slowly, "Leader told me to tell your Highness that he has never forgotten your Highness. He also hopes that one day he can meet you again just like before." Just like before. Princess Angelique was absent-minded for a moment. She lowered her head. She quickly raised her head. Her eyes were sharp. She sneered and said, "This guy, isn't he too arrogant? Why does he think that I will do as he wishes? Your Highness, I just told you the message. I don't know anything else. I will forget it soon." The Qingtian doll's head shook slightly. "Where is he now?" Princess Angelique said again in a deep voice, "He must be in the Holy Land. If he doesn't come out, I will find him even if I have to turn the entire Holy Land upside down." Leader didn't tell me where he is and what he wants to do. The Qingtian doll's head shook again and said, "Your Highness, of course. You can use any method to find him." "Humph, useless thing." Princess Angelique's eyes narrowed, but she suddenly chuckled. "Say, if I catch everyone in the circus and execute them publicly, will that guy show up?" The Qingtian doll's head said calmly, "I don't know if Leader will show up or not. But I think, if that's the case, Leader probably won't see your Highness again, right? Would I care?" Princess Angelique said expressionlessly. The Qingtian doll's head didn't say anything at this time. They just looked at each other in silence. After a long time, Princess Angelique sighed again and said, "Get lost. Take de Craye's face and disappear from my sight. Go back and tell that guy, since it's mine, no one can take it away. I'm not always so easy to talk to. Then goodbye." The Qingtian doll's head nodded and turned to leave. "Wait," Princess Angelique suddenly shouted. She bit her lips and asked in a low voice, "You really aren't him?" "Maybe. There's another face under this mask." The Qingtian doll's head didn't look back and didn't stop. "Your Highness, if you want to personally prove it, take it off." Until the Qingtian doll's head pushed open the door and walked out of the room. Princess Angelique didn't say anything. She just looked at the back of the figure until it disappeared. Suddenly, Princess Angelique opened the blanket on the chair and hid a unique pistol-type annihilator under it. Princess Angelique picked up the weapon without saying anything and directly shot at the window. The window and the wall were instantly annihilated. Princess Angelique frowned and looked at the empty room after the destruction. "Humph." Princess Angelique snorted and muttered, "Nothing good." In the distance, Senior's sister, Yulia, looked at the annihilated wall with lingering fear. Just now, she was listening to the conversation from the corner of the wall. Even though he didn't hear anything like Gigi or G-rocking sounds, he seemed to have heard some incredible conversation. It was so dangerous. At this moment, Prince Desolate was looking at the slightly pale senior sister, Yulia, with a smile. "I didn't scare you, right?" Senior sister, Yulia, said with a gulp, "Do you think that Princess Angelique knew that the person outside the room was you?" If it was Sister Huang Angelique, she probably knew. Prince Huang said with a relaxed expression, "It's easy to guess." "Then why did she?" Senior sister, Yulia, said in disbelief, "Does she have to kill you?" "Of course not." Prince Huang smiled and said, "It's just a fight between siblings." "Fight? Don't you think so, Sister Huang Angelique?" Senior sister, Yulia, was shocked and looked behind her. But at this moment, she felt a heavy knock on the back of her head. Senior sister, Yulia's head was knocked so hard that she fell to the ground. Before she fainted, she didn't think about why her black soul body couldn't be immune to such a blow. Instead, she thought about why she, as the dignified Kingo of the Void World, would be knocked out by a blow. Looking at senior sister, Yulia, who had completely fainted, Prince Huang directly grabbed her ankle and dragged her away. I'm doing this for your own good. After all, you heard Sister Huang's thoughts. You will die. Prince Huang narrowed his eyes and chuckled. Instead of falling into Sister Huang's hands, you might as well fall into my hands. 48, 49, 50. Gritting her teeth, Madanzo released the palms that were covering her eyes and turned around. Then she was dumbfounded. She saw that the open-air banquet hall was still crowded with people at this time. However, all the guests in front of him were wearing masks of various forms. Prince Cicero might be hiding here. How can this be called a normal hiding? Madanzo only felt that this family of the royal family was quite King bad. Chapter 2209. According to the legends, the founder, Califar, ended the War of the Gods and took all the power of the gods from the mythical creatures. He also established the absolute ruling position of the human race. Many years had passed. The pure-blood aristocrat changed generations after generations, but the founder, Califar, was still alive. He was like a god among the humans. I was careless. Prince Cicero is from the same era as the founder. Madanzo walked among the guests who were wearing masks with a serious expression. She didn't have any hope of finding the real Cicero among so many people. What are you doing? Just when Madanzo was confused, a very appropriate voice slowly sounded. It was the voice of Count Decria, the leader of the circus. However, Metatro couldn't help but wonder if this Mr. Regiment Commander was to himself. This family is too evil. This guy ended the conversation with the princess so quickly. However, since he could come back safely, there shouldn't be too much conflict in this conversation. Yulia didn't come back, so Madanzo couldn't make a judgment. She believed that Yulia must have secretly followed them to eavesdrop. As you can see, I'm being played by the prince. Hurry, what should I do? I'll wait here. Since it's just a game, there's no reward or punishment system. If you don't want to play, you can just admit defeat, Mr. Leader said in a relaxed and matter-of-fact tone. Madanzo blinked her eyes. That seems to be the case. But I unexpectedly want to win. Didn't you just want to visit this manor openly? Mr. Leader shook his head. Although the prince made a bet with you, a banquet is still a banquet. It will end when it's time. You should hurry up and do what you want to do. This manor is quite big. You're right. Thank you for reminding me. Madanzo nodded with a smile. Mr. Regiment Commander greeted them and walked into the crowd casually. He put on another mask, just like the other guests. I really can't see through him. Madanzo couldn't help but mutter. Then she ran out of the venue. Yulia quickly woke up. When she woke up, her head still hurt a little. The person who attacked her in front of her was definitely someone who didn't know how to be gentle with her. If I really use my full strength, you may be buried in the back garden of Sister Huang's manor. Prince Desolate's smiling face suddenly appeared in front of Senior Sister. Yulia. Senior Sister subconsciously gulped, and she said embarrassedly, Your Highness, what are you doing? She was tied up. They were tied up in a clean room. It wasn't too luxurious, but it wasn't ordinary either. It looked like a guest room. She could still vaguely hear the musicians playing in the banquet outside. Obviously, she was still in Princess Angelique's manor at this time and hadn't been transferred away. The key was that she was tied up and her atomization ability didn't work. She didn't feel safe at all. Prince Desolate said with a smile at this time, Guess what I'm going to do? Senior Sister said with a dry smile, Your Highness must have something to ask me, right? Prince Desolate nodded and immediately said, I also guessed that you wouldn't tell the truth, right? Senior sister couldn't help but say faintly, "Can we still be friends? It's hard to be my friend." Prince Desolate shrugged and said casually, "You may die in minutes. Are you mentally prepared for this?" Yulia was stunned. Although she was smart, she couldn't find anything to say at this time. She sighed and said seriously, "Your Highness, what do you want to ask?" "Who are you?" Prince Desolate asked as soon as he came up. "My name is Yulia. I'm a worker who aspires to become a magician. I'm working in the fantasy circus. Then, Count Decria took a fancy to me. He wanted to have sex with me, so he brought me with him so that he could have sex with me anytime and anywhere. Then, I came to this place as his sex toy. It shouldn't be." Prince Desolate said with a look of surprise and doubt, "When did that guy change his taste?" Senior sister hesitated and said, "Maybe not long ago?" Prince Desolate pondered and said, "Could it be that he has eaten too many delicacies and wants to try the taste of simple tea and plain food? Damage, almost no damage, but that one is extremely strong. If she wasn't tied up and her ability didn't disappear, she would beat him up. She also ate a lot of delicacies, okay? It's just that the one she can taste hasn't appeared yet." Prince Desolate shook his head and pondered about something. Suddenly, the prince took a box from the side. After opening it, there was a syringe inside. Senior sister, Yulia's heart skipped a beat, and she subconsciously said, Your Highness? This is the latest invention of the Research Institute, Melancholic Needle. Prince Desolate held the syringe in front of his chest with both hands as if he was buying an announcement. Once injected, it can instantly magnify a person's perception by 100 times. That's why it was welcomed by the nobles as soon as it appeared on the market. It was sold out for a while. 100 times. Senior sister subconsciously swallowed her saliva. She suddenly had an ominous premonition. Prince Desolate's smile became even wider. In other words, it can make a person's body 100 times more sensitive. It's the kind that can't withstand a slight touch. Of course, I think the 100 times is a lie. There shouldn't be any actual data. Then what's the actual data? Senior sister, Yulia, asked with a small hope. Probably. Prince Desolate thought about it seriously and said, 98 times. Senior sister could only give him a look of disbelief. However, Prince Desolate seemed to be a man of action. At this time, he directly pierced the syringe into senior sister, Yulia's arm, and slowly injected it. She widened her eyes, and her face was full of panic. She wanted to struggle, and then she felt it very quickly. I'm going to hit someone. I'm going to hit someone. I'm really going to hit someone. Dash! Shock, anger, pain, and unbearable groans were accompanied by the sound of clatter, 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 clatter. In the room, Prince Desolate was sitting at the table at this time. He held his chin with both hands and said with a smile, "How is it? This is my latest invention. Does it feel good?" At this time, the senior sister was sweating profusely. She resisted the terrible stimulation coming from her body. She almost bit her lips, but the itchy feeling was getting stronger and stronger. There was a machine under her feet. Strictly speaking, it was a wooden mechanism. Judging from its rough appearance, it might have been put together temporarily. A few feathers were inserted into the wooden mechanism. Then, under the effect of the wooden mechanism, the feathers were slowly turning, gently scratching the soles of her feet. She was definitely not a person who liked to tickle. She was a person whose fear of tickles was magnified by 100 times. I'm telling the truth. Senior sister shouted with a hoarse voice. It sounded like she was crying and laughing at the same time. It seems that the effect of the 100-fold needle isn't satisfactory. I'm too kind. Prince Desolate couldn't help but sigh. There's no other way. Fortunately, I also took a few 1,000-fold needles from the Research Institute. Where did I put them? Senior sister, Yulia's face instantly distorted. This time, she seemed to be really afraid of something. The sound of knocking on the door suddenly sounded. Your Highness, Her Highness the Empress asked you to go over. Prince Desolate blinked at this time as if he was a little surprised. Senior sister, Yulia, was relieved at this time, but her uncomfortable expression changed slightly. Okay, I'll go now. Prince Desolate helplessly put down the 1,000-fold needles in his hand. Then he ran out of the room and reached out to push the door. Oh, I forgot. Prince Desolate quickly closed the door and then ran back with small steps. He picked up the 1,000-fold needles and walked in front of Senior Sister, Yulia. Senior Sister, Yulia, looked at him in disbelief and disbelief. You're not a human, you're a demon. Prince Desolate, who quickly finished the injection, ran out again in small steps. When he closed the door, he didn't hurry to turn around and say, "Bye-bye." Senior Sister, Yulia, was absent-minded for a while before she reacted. She was so angry that her whole body trembled, but the feeling of being 10 times more turbulent surged again, like a tide. She almost lost her mind and said with a hoarse voice, "Damn you! You gave me this injection just to tickle me. If you have the ability, come back." It was still Princess Angelique's room, but the hole in the wall of the room had disappeared. Everything was intact. Princess Angelique had already changed into a dignified dress, sitting upright with a luxurious face. Seeing Prince Desolate come in, she didn't have any expression. "It's already so late. You're not having fun with the guests outside, nor are you doing anything shameful in your room. Instead, you want to see me, your good-for-nothing brother. What's the reason? I don't know how to perform magic." Prince Desolate was very respectful, and his etiquette was impeccable, but his words were not pleasant to hear. However, Princess Angelique didn't seem to hear it and said indifferently, "I heard that you brought a woman into the room, right?" "Yes, the one who was eavesdropping outside with me just now." Prince Desolate nodded. "Sister Huang, if you like it, I'll ask someone to send it to you later." "No need." Princess Angelique said expressionlessly, "I'm not interested in the things you used. Eavesdropping? Did you hear anything interesting?" "I didn't hear it." Prince Desolate said with a disappointed look, "You guys are too good at playing. I don't understand. I'm just a child." Her Royal Highness flicked her sleeves at this time and said indifferently, "It's late. If there's nothing else, I'll ask someone to send you back to the palace. The time for you to come out today is coming soon." Prince Huang sighed and said pitifully, "Royal sister, how can you be so cruel? If I want to see you, I will have to wait until the next birthday party you hold. Then I will have a chance to see you. If you want to see me, ask someone to inform me, and I will naturally go to see you." Princess Angelique said casually, "But you can't leave your residence at will. This is the order from His Majesty. Don't forget it." Prince Desolate sighed again and said helplessly, "It seems that father still favors me more and always wants to keep me by his side. There's no other way. I'll go by myself. I don't need to bother Sister Huang to send me off." Princess Angelique suddenly said loudly, "Guards, escort Prince Desolate back to the palace." "Okay." Prince Desolate shrugged and said with a smile, "Sure enough, in Sister Huang's heart, you only like one person. When you see me, your clothes are so tight. Do I need to like you?" Princess Angelique said indifferently, "You unkillable monster." Prince Desolate bowed respectfully, then patted his heart and then spread his hands. Just like this. He walked backward until he reached the door. Then he left. After the prince left, 2 figures in black suddenly flashed in the room. They knelt in front of the princess and said in unison, "Your Highness, what are your orders?" Princess Angelique said indifferently, "When you go back, kill this guy once." The 2 figures in black looked at each other subconsciously, and they both understood the meaning in each other's eyes. Kill again? How many times have we killed him? Are these two done yet? Yes, Your Highness. Your Highness, this is not the way back. I still have to bring something back. Just wait for a while. Prince Desolate said casually. By the way, with the relationship between me and my sister Huang, if I bury you here, she won't blame me, right? The attendants looked at each other in fear and said with a trembling voice, We will wait outside the door. So obedient, Prince Desolate pushed the door open and entered the guest room. At this time, in the guest room, Senior's sister, Yulia, who was tied up, was almost drenched. The bright and clean floor was even soaked with water. It was unknown whether it was sweat or other water or both. She had lowered her head, and her body was twitching from time to time. Prince Desolate approached in amazement and finally squatted down, looking up at Senior Sister, Yulia's face. What a strong willpower! It seems that the 1,000 times needle underestimated you. If I had known, I would have greeted you with the 10,000 times needle. Senior Sister, Yulia's eyes were absent-minded, as if she couldn't hear anything. Prince Desolate smiled at this time and said, Don't worry, the 10,000 times needle hasn't been developed yet. Senior Sister, Yulia's fingers twitched slightly and her eyelids twitched. But there is still the 5,000 times needle. Damn it, my mother is dead. Prince Desolate suddenly said. Senior Sister, Yulia only felt that her whole body, her whole soul suddenly shivered, and her absent-minded eyes couldn't pretend any more. She instantly became clear. Prince Desolate suddenly chuckled, and he reached out to untie the rope on Senior Sister's body. At the same time, he gave her another injection, saying that the 1,000 times dull needle could offset the previous 1,000 times ecstasy needle, and so on. The Senior Sister collapsed on the ground, feeling as if her body had been played with until it was broken. Come, bring this young lady. Prince Desolate ordered the attendant outside at this time. Be careful. This is my most important guest this year. Yes, at this time a flame lit up the sky, and the entire manor was illuminated with a fiery red color. The manor was instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. Look, what is that? Isn't that how? Above the sea of fire, a huge balloon was rising into the air. Under the balloon, a man wearing a black suit and a silver mask was hanging. At this time, the man was even holding a man with long silver hair in his hand. Cicero, His Highness the Prince. On the ground, Princess Angelique rushed out of the fire under the protection of many servants. Looking at the balloon that had already flown high, she was absent-minded for a moment and then frowned. At this time, a flying paper slowly floated down. A hand caught the flying paper. It was Prince Desolate. The prince lowered his head and looked at the content of the paper in his hand, then looked at Princess Angelique in front of him and said with a smile, It seems that the most precious treasure tonight isn't you, Sister Huang. However, he really did make a move. Humph! Princess Angelique snorted softly, then waved her hand and said in a deep voice, Put out the fire! Chapter 2210. The fire in the manor was quickly put out, but the king of the world was kidnapped. This was the worst kind of provocation to the world government. Outside the manor, a large group of purge knights had arrived. Every guest, including their attendants, was being interrogated by the purge knights. Even the coachmen waiting outside were being interrogated. Even though the pure-blooded nobles had absolute privileges, they were still inferior to the power of the royal family. Even if they were in conflict, they could only cooperate obediently. I really don't know anything. Sir, stop beating them. Screams of pain could be heard everywhere. Even though it was an interrogation, the treatment of the nobles and the servants of the nobles were completely different. In the temporary tents set up outside the manor, the knights captured 10 attendants at once and interrogated them with tortures. The newly promoted Purge Knight commander, Balaam, heaved a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and tossed the leather whip away. He was probably tired from the beating. He sat down and took a big gulp of water before he said to Knight Bismay, "I don't think we can get anything out of this batch. Let's change to the next batch." Knight Bismay shook his head. "The next batch won't be able to get anything out of them. If the clown is the one who did it, we can interrogate everyone in the manor and still get nothing out of them." Knight Balaam asked curiously, "Bismay, you seem to be very familiar with the clown?" Bismay frowned and remembered that this person was a new commander of the knights who came out of nowhere. He didn't seem to have worked in the Holy Land before. Instead, he was promoted from somewhere else. Humph. But Bismay only snorted coldly and left his seat, walking out of the tent. Commander Balaam could only look at his subordinates in the tent with an innocent expression. "Did I say something wrong?" At this moment, a subordinate quietly came up and said, "Lord Balaam, Lord Bismay wasn't a purge knight in the past. Instead, he was the commander of the Royal Knights. His status isn't something we can compare to. However, a few years ago, the strange bandit clown broke into the palace and successfully escaped. As the person in charge of that incident, Lord Bismay was almost executed. Later on, I heard that it was the prince who stopped him, so he was assigned to the Purge Knights as a punishment." "I see." Commander Balaam nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, let's switch to the next batch. I don't feel tired anymore." "Okay." "This Lord Balaam is truly vicious and merciless," the subordinate thought to himself. "All of you walk faster." That night was supposed to be Princess Angelique's banquet. Most of the nobles in the Holy Land were present, so naturally there were more attendants. After all, the nobles, especially the pure-blooded nobles, were always extravagant when they went out. However, it also increased the difficulty of the Purge Knights' interrogation. The nobles' followers that were under control were now being escorted away in batches. Daphne was one of the escorts. When the manor caught on fire, the situation was chaotic. Daphne was separated from the others at that time and was immediately captured by the Purge Knights. In front of her was the temporary camp of the Purge Knights. Screams kept coming out from the tents. Daphne walked in group, and her face paled when she was about to be interrogated. "I wonder where Mr. Commander is right now. Will his identity be discovered? There's also everyone in the circus. And that Miss Yulia." Daphne was worried about many people, and then she was worried about herself. Although the interrogation was scary, it wasn't to the extent of killing someone. At the very least, she hadn't heard of any followers being tortured to death. Heavy injuries, torture. It seemed like she had experienced it before. Daphne's expression dimmed. The nobles' followers around her all had terrified expressions on their faces. Everyone was in the same situation, so they didn't care about what the people around them looked like. At this moment, Daphne suddenly felt her hands that were tied behind her back suddenly loosen. Maiden's heart skipped a beat. In the next second, she felt her body being forcefully pulled over by something. Even her mouth was covered. Daphne's eyes widened. She heard someone quickly say, "Shh, don't shout, it's me." Daphne was pulled into a thicket of flowers by the roadside. At this moment, she couldn't care less about the piercing pain caused by the thorns on the branches and leaves, because Daphne had already recognized the owner of that voice. Kaliana, the half-elf girl who was brought along with Medanzo. What was even more unbelievable was that Kaliana was wearing the maid uniform of the Princess Manor. When was she? "Come with me first." Kaliana lowered her voice and said, after evading the guards of the manor, the two snuck into a dark room. Kariana quickly threw Daphne a maid's uniform. "Thank you." Daphne felt like she had survived a disaster. "But you, how did you? Aren't I a half-elf?" Kaliana said casually, "Although my bloodline isn't pure, I still have some elven abilities. My senses are stronger than normal people. Did you see anyone else?" Daphne asked with concern as she put on the maid uniform. Kaliana shook her head. "I wanted to see if I could find a chance to escape, but I didn't expect to run into you. You're the only one. I didn't see anyone else. But you don't have to worry. Isn't that powerful magician pretending to be a pure-blooded noble? The Purge Knights wouldn't dare to do anything to a pure-blooded noble, even with the princess orders. As for that person who calls herself Madanzo, you don't have to worry either. That person looks mysterious and has a lot of tricks up her sleeves. Daphne, who had already changed into the maid uniform, suddenly asked, "Say, if I go out and ask around..." Kaliana quickly stopped this dangerous thought. "Do you think you'll be safe just by changing into the maid uniform? At most, you'll be able to fool the unfamiliar Purge Knights. If you run into the servants of the manor, you'll be exposed immediately. Let's hide here for now and see if we can find a chance to sneak out tomorrow morning when everyone is tired. By the way, are you hungry?" Daphne shook her head, indicating that she wasn't in the mood. Kaliana shrugged and took out a ball of cloth. It was filled with the exquisite pastries from the banquet. Of course, they were all squashed into lumps and didn't look good. At this time, Kaliana was eating happily. Daphne looked at this spirited girl in a daze. She felt that Kaliana was the type who could survive no matter where she was. Optimist? By the way, when I was hiding, I heard something. The girl's lips were covered with pastry powder as she said mysteriously, "I heard that the princess is going to execute all the guests and attendants tonight except for the pure-blooded nobles." "Those bestowed nobles as well? Didn't I say that it's everything except for pure blood?" "Of course, it includes bestowed nobles." Kaliana shrugged. "Haven't you heard of this queen's nickname?" Daphne shook her head. Kaliana swallowed the food in her mouth and said, seriously, "Scarlet Killer Mistress." The fire in the manor burned many places in the manor into a grayish-black color. However, it didn't burn down the buildings here. In a relatively clean tower, Princess Angelique was looking down. The expressionless princess made the stewards, the commander of the Royal Knights, and the commander of the Purge Knights behind her tense up. Probably only Prince Desolate was relaxed. The prince hadn't left yet. Since the world prince had been kidnapped and such a big thing had happened, the prince immediately had a good reason to stay. So, he happily stayed and didn't leave. Regarding this, even Her Royal Highness didn't seem to have a good solution. She could only act as if what she didn't see couldn't hurt her. "Your Highness, are we really going to execute these people?" The commander of the Royal Knights had to brace himself and ask. It was acceptable to execute the attendants, and those nobles wouldn't care about the lives of the attendants. However, the identity of the bestowed nobles was different after all. Her Royal Highness said indifferently, someone has to pay the price for doing something wrong. The greater the price, the more people will understand how many innocent people will be implicated the next time they do something similar. Being willful also needs to stop. While saying this, Her Royal Highness glanced at Prince Desolate, not far away, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally. Prince Desolate blinked his eyes and mouthed high. The commander of the Royal Knights felt that the meaning of these words was a little unclear. He didn't understand why Her Royal Highness didn't immediately organize people to capture the world prince. Instead, she wanted to execute so many people. However, Her Royal Highness had always been a bloodthirsty person. If she just wanted to vent her anger, Her Royal Highness would even kill the pure-blood nobles. Moreover, she had killed quite a number of them. Then what about Her Majesty's side? The commander of the Royal Knights braced himself and asked again. Princess Angelique looked outside the tower. After a moment of silence, she slowly said, "There will be a reaction soon. Look, isn't it here?" Here, everyone subconsciously looked up and saw a black shadow flying quickly in the night sky. The black shadow landed, and, surprisingly, it was a silver steel unicorn flying horse. And on the steel unicorn flying horse, there was a handsome young master wearing a long black windbreaker sitting on it. The young master on the flying horse landed. The commander of the Royal Knights, the commander of the Purge Knights, and the others all lowered their heads. The matter of the prince being kidnapped had indeed alarmed this person. the founding emperor, one of the 7 generals by His Majesty Califar's side, the King General of Heaven, Fushi, the young master in the black windbreaker, walked over slowly. He bowed slightly in front of Princess Angelique and said, "Your Royal Highness, good evening. Prince Desolate, good evening." Fushi, Princess Angelique, nodded indifferently. "Since Her Majesty asked you to come, it means that Her Majesty is not in a good mood." The King General of Heaven smiled slightly and took out a small brocade box. "Your Royal Highness, this is the birthday gift Her Majesty asked me to give you." Princess Angelique frowned, but reached out to take it. She muttered, What else did he say?" Heaven King Fushi revealed a warm smile and said, "I will be in charge of the search for the strange bandits from now on. His Majesty said that your Highness has been frightened tonight and needs to rest well. Don't worry about anything else." "What if I insist on interfering?" Her Highness asked abruptly. "Her Majesty said that your Royal Highness will have a good rest," the King General of Heaven said calmly. Princess Angelique's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked at Fushi for a moment, then ordered expressionlessly, "Men, prepare a room. I want to rest." After saying that, Her Royal Highness flung her sleeves and left. The knights did not dare to move at this time, let alone look up. They even tried to breathe as lightly as possible. But at this moment, a terrified scream came from below the manor. The King General of Heaven frowned slightly and looked down casually. What happened? Outside, a knight walked in with his scalp tingling. He trembled and said, "Her Royal Highness Angelique just gave the order. Kill, kill immediately." King General of Heaven shook his head slightly at this time. She really means what she says. Or is she dissatisfied? No one dared to respond to this question. Forget it. Let's just kill them. Anyway, this year's quota of nobles is not enough. King General of Heaven said rather casually, "It's better than Her Royal Highness throwing a tantrum. Don't you think so, Prince Desolate?" "Ah, you called me?" Prince Desolate was at the exit at this time, and he was about to leave. "Prince Desolate, it's past midnight." King General of Heaven smiled and said, "Your application to leave the palace has exceeded the time limit. You have to go back. Her Majesty misses you very much." "I'm going back now." "Men, escort Prince Desolate back to the palace. Why is the TV off?" The girl had just sneaked out of the room. Her goal was to avoid her brother's attention and successfully steal the happy drink and cherries for cultivation tonight from the fridge. Then she stole the instant noodles and sole ham sausage on the cupboard. "It's a bit late. Get ready to sleep." Boss Luo said casually, "You have to wake up early tomorrow." The girl blinked her eyes. What was on the TV just now? It seemed that she saw a flying steel Pegasus. It seemed that some strange programs were being broadcasted recently, but when she turned on the TV, she couldn't find them. Could it be that her brother paid for them to be broadcasted? Since he paid for them, he should have broadcasted some restricted programs. As an adult male, he should have some adult male needs. He had such a cute sister by his side. Wake up early for what? The girl asked in surprise at this time. Something. "I have to go on a business trip for a few days," Boss Luo said softly. "Business trip?" The girl couldn't help but widen her eyes. "Yes." Boss Luo smiled and said, "That's why I have to leave here for a few days." The girl froze for a moment. Then, her pitiful tears almost flowed out of her eyes. She shouted in her heart, "Hooray! Hooray! Hooray for a business trip! Brother, you have to come back soon." "I see." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Then I'll reject the business trip." The girl was petrified. Boss Luo smiled and walked to the girl's side. He patted her head and said, "Rest early. Freedom City. Is there anything wrong with your channel?" "I can't see anything." "What about Daphne?" Who cares about Daphne? I want to see Yulia. My Yulia can't see either. At this time, they suddenly realized that they couldn't see anything from several angles. Chapter 22:11. The door of the room was opened slightly. She first observed the environment of the living room. After making sure it was safe, she yawned and walked out. It was about 7 or 8 in the morning. Some breakfast was covered with a lid on the table, and there was a note beside it. The girl picked up the note and glanced at it. She seemed to be absent-minded. After a while, she murmured, "He really went on a business trip." The girl sat down and lowered her head. There was no one else on the table except her, and the food was getting cold. She clenched the note in her hand, and her shoulders trembled slightly. In this empty house, I wake up early in the morning and open the door. I'm in a good mood. My brother went on a business trip early in the morning. I'm in a good mood. I open my piggy bank. I'm in a good mood. Suddenly, the girl jumped on the chair and laughed with her arms akimbo. Lights and shadows were floating. In the airspace of the Holy Land where the airships were parked, lights and shadows were floating on the deck of the royal airship Lesia. Standing here, Luo Qiu could almost see the entire Holy Land. This was the moment when dawn was about to arrive. It was supposed to be dark, but the Holy Land was brightly lit. He didn't intend to enter other pages, but the content recorded in this page world seemed to be a bit excessive. There were many airships in the airspace, but only the royal airship could be parked at the highest point. And in front of the airspace, there was a huge castle floating above the Holy Land. It was the center of the imperial power where the founder of the Holy Land was. Luo Qiu calmly looked at the floating castle, as if there was someone in the depths of the castle who was responding to him with the same gaze. Boss Luo slowly sighed and waved his hand. A golden page began to slowly condense in his palm. It had not reached the end, nor had it triggered the content it should have. The page of this world was formed naturally. Boss Luo lowered his head and glanced at the words that gradually emerged, and began to narrate the core content of this page world. Eternal calendar, the 10th day of the bloody moon, rainy day. Today, Angelique's sister Huang will be executed. In the manor in the tower, one of the 7 royal generals, the Fushi royal general, was currently playing with a grade 5 Rubik's Cube in his hands. Lord Fushi, according to your orders, the entire Holy Land has been sealed off. Before this, we have not received any reports of suspicious people leaving the Holy Land. The guy who kidnapped the prince should still be hiding somewhere in the Holy Land. All the purge knights have been dispatched and are searching from house to house. I believe there will be results soon. Fushi Imperial General rested his chin on his hand and said casually, "How soon is soon?" Yes. The great commander of the Royal Knights who came to report instantly lost his composure. Yes, we will do it as soon as possible. How soon is as soon as possible? Fushi asked again. The great commander of the Royal Knights could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He knew that if he gave an ambiguous answer again, he would definitely not have a good ending. He could only brace himself and say, "Today." Before he could finish his words, a figure barged in. The few royal knights guarding outside were unable to stop him. The great commander of the Royal Knights instantly felt as if he had been saved. He immediately shouted angrily, "How dare you!" "I'm sorry, Lord. We have already warned him, but we could not stop him. Commander Bismai." The few royal knights stationed outside said in fear. The person who barged in was the Knight Bismai of the Purge Knights. The great commander of the Royal Knights immediately shouted angrily, "Bismai, you have already been expelled from the Royal Knights. This is not a place where you should be. Leave immediately." Bismai ignored him and knelt down in front of the Heavenly King General, Fushi. "Greetings, Fushi Imperial General." Bismai, the great commander of the Royal Knights, shouted angrily again. Fushi Imperial General waved his hand at this moment, indicating for the great commander to be quiet. He sized up Bismai and then chuckled. Did you come to me with clues, or do you have other motives? I'll give you 1 minute, seeing that you've done your duty to protect the Imperial Palace. Fushi Imperial General, this subordinate requests to be able to participate in the operation to capture Clown. Fushi Imperial General said, we are searching the entire city right now. Doesn't this count as you participating in this operation? Bismai raised his head and said seriously, I hope Imperial General can allow me to bring a team of royal knights with me so that I can accurately behead Clown. Oh, Fushi Imperial General said. Bismai, you want to redeem yourself. That's right. Bismai took a deep breath and said, 3 years ago I let Clown leave so easily. This is the greatest shame of my life. This shame can only be washed away with blood. Please allow me, Imperial General. I am willing to make a military order. If I fail, I will die. You are quite determined. Fushi Imperial General shook his head. But to you, that is not necessarily a shame. Actually, His Highness Cicero protected you back then and sent you to the Purge Knights. In a few years, you will have the chance to return to the Royal Knights. You don't have to rush now. Please allow me, Lord. I allow it. Fushi Imperial General said calmly, but I have a condition. Bismai didn't hesitate and said loudly, I don't care what condition it is. Fushi Imperial General smiled and said, there is no need to make a military order. If we don't catch the person in the end, you can go to Silent Star Ocean and report yourself there. You can also serve His Majesty there. Thank you, my lord. Bismai took a deep breath. Fushi Imperial General waved his hand and said, from now on, Bismai will be in charge of this operation. The commander of the Royal Knights was still there, and he had a hesitant expression on his face at this moment. Lord, the kidnapping of the prince is a big matter. Isn't it too hasty? Fushi Imperial General smiled casually and said, why? Don't you want your former superior to wash away your shame? I didn't mean it like that. Then accompany me to have breakfast. Fushi Imperial General smiled and said, the breakfast shop at West God Street should be opening soon. But what about the prince? The Fushi Royal General waved his hand and said, don't worry, don't worry. Who is His Highness Cicero? If he doesn't want to be taken away, even the 7 royal generals wouldn't be able to move him. Then could it be? The Royal Knight Commander's expression changed slightly. However, a Rubik's Cube suddenly flew over, and he subconsciously caught it. At the same time, he stopped thinking. The Royal Knight Commander was already in front. He had no choice but to chase after him. The sky is about to brighten. In a room in the manor, Daphne carefully closed the window that was slightly ajar and looked back at Karina. The half-elf girl yawned and seemed to be very tired. However, she patted her cheeks and forced herself to be energetic and said, now is the time when people are mentally tired. The people outside should be more relaxed. The screams outside have stopped for a while. I think most of the people have been killed. Those so many people, have they really been killed? Daphne seemed to be in disbelief. Hundreds or thousands of lives were so easily lost in a single night. Daphne even hoped that those were the screams when they were being interrogated and not the screams of death. Ever since she was young, the deaths that Daphne had experienced were the deaths of the elders in the village, dying of illness or dying without any illness. It was a natural cycle. The free cities, and even the entire Holy Light Kingdom, did not fear death. The believers saw death as a kind of return and should be happy. To Daphne, a massacre was not only an extremely distant thing, but it was also a very unfamiliar and confusing thing. Karina gently patted Daphne's shoulder and said, what you need to think is to thank them for dying. That's why we have a chance to blend in with the corpses. You mean? Daphne instantly understood. This is the princess manor after all. They can't keep piling up corpses. They will definitely move the corpses away and dispose of them. Karina shrugged and said, only then will we have the safest chance to leave the manor. Of course, before we blend in with the corpses, it's still not safe. Are you ready? Daphne nodded hesitantly. Then let's go. Karina quickly stood up. "Who is it? Come out." In a corner of the manor, a few royal knights were surrounding a flower trough and shrubs with stern expressions. The branches and leaves swayed, and then a small figure slowly crawled out from inside and raised his hands. It was a young, well-dressed child who could even be considered a child. "Capture him!" The knight immediately shouted with a stern expression. "Bring him back for interrogation!" "Wait a minute!" The innocent-looking child in luxurious clothes hurriedly shouted. "You can't capture me!" How could the knight listen to him? He stepped forward and grabbed the arm of the child in luxurious clothes, easily subduing him. "Wait a minute. I have an agreement with Prince Cicero. You can't capture me," the child in luxurious clothes quickly said again. "Agreement? Humph! His Highness the Prince is already. Who cares about a suspicious fellow like you?" A royal knight immediately snorted. However, another royal knight suddenly whispered into his ear. "This child seems to have an agreement with His Highness the Prince previously. They were playing a game." So what?" The child in luxurious clothes. Madanzo quickly said, "I can walk freely in the manor, and no one can stop me. This is an order personally given by His Highness the Prince. If his orders can't be carried out because His Highness the Prince is no longer around, does it mean that someone dares to disobey His Highness the Prince's orders?" The royal knight's expressions changed slightly. Madanzo said indifferently, "His Highness the Prince is busy, so he might soon forget this agreement. But no one knows when he will suddenly remember it and ask about it. When he asks, he will find out that you have captured me." The royal knights frowned, but the knight with a tough attitude suddenly said, "Little brat, you don't seem to be a noble, right?" "Whether I am a noble or not, does it have anything to do with the prince's agreement with me?" Madanzo sneered and then shouted in a low voice, "Let go!" The knight who grabbed his arms subconsciously panicked and loosened his grip. "Don't follow me, do your thing." Madanzo left calmly. Then she panicked. If a knight dared to draw his sword at this moment, he would lose his life. "What should we do?" The knights quickly discussed. "Go over and follow him. Don't let him run away. You can't stop him. We can follow him all the way. Wait for me to ask the Grand Commander about this matter." Although it was an emergency, it was still an order from His Highness the Prince. The knights quickly made a decision and then split up. Two knights instantly followed behind Madanzo. They didn't say anything and just followed silently. Madanzo cursed her bad luck. If only the background characters who couldn't even call out these names had a lower IQ, they wouldn't be like this. Run. She couldn't run away. At this moment, who could run faster with her short legs? She couldn't even open her wings and could only hide. However, the noses of these royal knights were as sharp as dogs. Madanzo felt that this game wasn't fun at all. A game that couldn't be cheated wasn't a good game. Sooner or later, it would go bankrupt. At this moment, two maids of the manor walked over. The maid walked in front of Madanzo, but looked at the two royal knights behind her and said, "Her Highness the Empress wants to see this child. We'll take him away." Madanzo blinked her eyes. What kind of development was this? The two royal knights also blinked at this moment, but they were more glad in their hearts. This little brat was not only related to His Highness the Prince, but even the Empress wanted to see him. He was simply a moving pit, okay. Fortunately, they didn't use force just now, since it's Her Highness Angelique's orders. "Please go ahead." The royal knights instantly had no objections and quickly threw this hot potato out. The two maids then grabbed Metatro's wrists from both sides and quickly left. "Sisters, I wonder why Her Highness the Empress is looking for me?" Madanzo raised her head and asked innocently. "Her Highness wants to see you. You'll know when you get there. Why do you have so many questions?" Madanzo blinked her eyes. She felt like she had seen this scene somewhere before, so she muttered, "Sisters, I don't know if you've heard of someone called Lu Yan. She's also working here." "Lu Yan? I've never heard of her." There are at least 1,000 servants in the manor. We won't know all of them. The maid thought for a while and said, "This Lu Yen is my aunt." Madanzo said in a fawning manner, "She and my uncle are close friends, the very loving kind. Sisters, round up, I'm also considered a member of the manor. Woo." When she spoke again, Madanzo's mouth had been directly stuffed with a handkerchief. "We don't know Lu Yen. If you continue to talk nonsense, we'll cut off your tongue. Let's go." The throne was extremely high. This hall was also extremely high and quiet. Under the throne, Prince Huang lowered his head on one knee and knelt in front of the throne, talking in detail about what he had experienced last night. "It seems that a lot of interesting things have happened." A doting voice floated down from the throne. "Then did you have fun today?" "Quite happy." Prince Huang raised his smiling face at this time. "If I could be so happy every day, that would be great." "Is that so?" The voice on the throne sounded again. But that was all. There was no answer that Prince Huang might have expected. "He's back." The voice on the throne sounded again, faint. "Yes, go back. I'm tired. I'll take my leave." Chapter 22:12. When she saw Princess Angelique, she was cleaning something, the powerful weapon, extinguisher. There were many kinds of parts neatly placed on the table, which should belong to the same weapon. The display cabinets around were filled with different types of extinguisher. The whole room was more like an arsenal. The two maids stuffed a handkerchief into Madanzo's mouth and tied her hands behind her back and threw her to the ground. "Your Highness, she is here. You can leave first." It was only after the two maids left that Madanzo sat up. Her Highness was still maintaining the weapons on the table until the parts were assembled again. It was a big guy that looked like a barret. It was placed on the table and aimed at Madanzo, who was sitting on the ground. She squinted her eyes and adjusted the crosshairs on the weapon. Suddenly, the muzzle of the annihilator released a faint light. Metatro felt that his mouth was empty. The handkerchief that was stuffed there had disappeared, leaving only a powdery substance in his mouth. "Wow, that's amazing!" Metatro exclaimed. "I can't believe this weapon has such good performance." Princess Angelique said indifferently, "This is specially customized by the Research Institute. There is only one of it in the world." That was the first shot. Madanzo was stunned for a moment before he smiled bitterly. "I'm very grateful." Princess Angelique said, "Do you know why I asked you to come here?" Madanzo thought for a while and said, "Because of the bet between the prince and me." Princess Angelique shook her head. Madanzo said in a low voice, "Because of Count de Crea? I'm with him, so you want to ask me about him?" Princess Angelique said indifferently, "Among the pure-blood nobles. De Crea's identity is not bad, but for me it is just that." Madanzo shrugged and said, "Then I won't guess." "Your Highness, please tell me. Save some time. Maybe we can have breakfast or something like that. Since you set off." Princess Angelique ran her fingers through her hair. "I know your every move, including the assassin's body that was thrown off the airship on the way." Madanzo's expression didn't change. She was as steady as an old dog and smiled slightly. Her Royal Highness said, "There's one thing that is quite strange. That de Crea is clearly right next to you, but the Deacon Babalia insists that you are his master." Madanzo said calmly, "Your Highness, what do you think?" Princess Angelique chuckled and narrowed her eyes. "Perhaps let's make a bold assumption. The real de Crea is already dead, and a guy who likes to perform magic used his exquisite skills to disguise himself as de Crea. During this process, there is also a guy's brat who used some unknown method to temporarily distort Babalia's perception. Because of this, he came to the banquet by accident." Madanzo opened her mouth slightly and then sighed heavily. She said rather helplessly, "By the way, Your Highness, are you all from the royal family? So terrifying." "What kind of people are they?" Cicero easily sealed him. That Prince Desolation was smiling as if he would release a poisonous snake at any time. This princess was either very resourceful and had eyes everywhere in the Holy Land, or she was too smart. Furthermore, she was a violent person who had converted the study into an arsenal. Tell me, what method did you use to distort Babelia's perception? Princess Angelique said calmly, Babelia's willpower is not bad, and the royal knights also wanted to recruit him. It's just that when he was born, he was indebted to the Decria family. That's why even though he was the runner-up in the Saint Land swordsmanship tournament, he still went back to repay the debt of gratitude. A loyal fellow like him won't easily recognize the wrong master. Madanzo shrugged and said, Even if I said it, I can't use it now. My ability has been sealed by the prince. When Princess Angelique frowned, Madanzo said, Before the start of the game, Princess Angelique was expressionless. After a while, she asked coldly, Where is that guy now? You are asking about the circus leader, right? Madanzo shook her head. Actually, I am not very close to him. We met on the road and formed a temporary partnership. I don't like the way you look at me. It reminds me of that annoying brother of mine. Princess Angelique smiled and said, Give me a reason to keep you. Madanzo blinked and said, tentatively, Don't be in a hurry to kill me. Let me rest for a while. Maybe I can grow up? Goodbye. Princess Angelique was expressionless, but her fingers had already pulled the trigger on the table. A ray of light as thick as a finger shot out and directly pierced Madanzo's forehead. The playful smile on Madanzo's face did not disappear, but her eyes had already dimmed. She fell directly to the ground. 2 maids pushed the door open and entered at this time. They looked at the corpse on the ground and waited for Princess Angelique's orders. Princess Angelique put the weapon into the cabinet and said calmly, Stab her a few more times. It's okay to chop her up. After all, there is only one person in the palace who can't be killed. She is an eyesore. Yes. The 2 maids began to drag Madanzo's body. Wait a minute. Princess Angelique suddenly stopped the maids and said in a low voice, How long has it been since she was fed? Almost 2 months. One of the maids said, According to your order, we only gave her half a cup of water every day. Use this to feed her. Princess Angelique turned around and pointed at Madanzo's body. The bodies in the manor were being transported away in batches. Even though these bodies were the servants of the pure-blood nobles, and many of them were even titled nobles, no one dared to come and claim them. The bodies would be directly transported to the incineration plant in the Holy Land for disposal. The order had been given. The incineration plant had already sent the tools for disposal, and they were parked outside the manor. Hurry up! There are still a lot of bodies to be transported. We must clean this place up before the sun rises. This is Princess Angelique's manor. The bodies were thrown into the carriages, one after another. Due to the urgency, they didn't even have time to check who was who. At this moment, 2 black shadows quietly crept up nearby. Then, taking advantage of the moment when the porter turned around, they jumped into a carriage that was about to be filled up. Daphne and Caliana. After a while, the carriages closed and started to move at a steady speed. There wasn't much shaking on the road, but Daphne felt extremely uncomfortable lying in the middle of the bodies. However, the maiden was afraid that her discomfort would cause unnecessary trouble. Therefore, even though her stomach started to churn and her mind was extremely tense, she forced herself not to make any noise. Daphne even pinched her arm hard to distract herself with the pain. It's okay to relax. You can talk as long as you don't make any noise. We should be some distance away from the manor, so it's not that serious. The half-elf girl suddenly said. Caliana even took out a necklace from her collar. After the pendant on the necklace was opened, it released some dark green light, illuminating the dark carriage. Daphne was stunned. She felt that it was even scarier when the carriage was closed. This is the light from the dark green stone. I can't do anything about it. Caliana shrugged. You'll get used to it. I'll try my best. Daphne nodded. The half-elf girl was obviously much more relaxed now. She sat on the back of a body and even started to flip through the body's clothes. What are you doing? Daphne was shocked. Caliana said matter-of-factly, most of these guys are servants of nobles. Those who can be brought along by nobles must be living a good life. When they were dealing with the bodies, the knights brought them here. There must be a lot of valuable things here. I thought it would be good enough if we could escape. I didn't expect to get rich, This isn't good, is it? Anyway, when the bodies are sent to be burned, the workers of the incineration factory will search them. Caliana shrugged. Instead of letting those guys benefit, why not let us benefit? We were scared tonight, so we should at least get some compensation. What? Are you obsessed with cleanliness? Daphne shook her head and still didn't do anything. Caliana looked around and suddenly said, You and I don't have anything on us now. Even if we escape, we won't be able to survive in the Holy Land, let alone leave the Holy Land. Let me tell you, there are no beggars in the Holy Land. If you go begging on the streets, you will immediately be caught and dealt with. Are you planning to steal or rob? Daphne couldn't help but be startled. Caliana continued, You have to survive first. Only then will you have a way to think about the future. Even if it's just to find out about your commander, you have to be able to eat first. Daphne sighed and silently began to flip open the clothes of the corpse under her. Her eyes were unexpectedly serious. Caliana couldn't help but be startled. She stopped. Daphne seemed to have sensed that Caliana had stopped. She couldn't help but look up in confusion. Is there something on my face? Actually, it's not that you don't know how to do bad things, Caliana suddenly said. It's just that you haven't found a reason to do bad things, right? Daphne was stunned. She subconsciously lowered her head. Under the green fluorescent light, her hands were already stained with the blood of the corpses. Maiden subconsciously shuddered. Caliana shook her head and casually said, Pretend I didn't say anything. The carriage suddenly fell into silence. Those eyes that hadn't closed because of their tragic deaths were silently looking at the two figures who were rummaging through the corpses. Suddenly, the carriage shook violently. Then it tilted to one side. Outside, there seemed to be a scream. Something seemed to have happened. It sounded like the sound of a battle. The overturned carriage on the ground suddenly opened. Several corpses rolled out. The cold air from outside instantly poured into the carriage. Daphne, who was buried under the corpses, could only see some of the scene outside through the cracks. Torches, flames, a few people with half of their faces covered with black cloth. They weren't the workers of the incineration factory, nor were they the powerful purge knights. There are so many of them. I didn't expect the news to be true. All right, don't just stand there. Hurry up. This place will be discovered soon. Hurry up and leave with the things. I'll drive the carriage. You guys hurry up. The overturned carriage was lifted up again. The corpses outside were thrown back in. The masked people sealed the carriage again. Soon, Daphne felt the movement of the carriage moving forward again. She saw Caliana crawling out from the entanglement of several arms, spitting out a mouthful of saliva, and said in annoyance, Could it be that we ran into a fellow traveler? Colleague? What colleague? Puff, puff, puff. The knife went in and out of Madanzo's body 3 times. The maid holding the knife didn't have any expression on her face. Then she began to wipe the knife in her hand slowly. You are really careful. Her companion shook her head at this moment. In this world, there is only one prince desolate. How can this little brat not be killed? The maid said indifferently, His Highness ordered. Just do it. Hurry up and feed it to that thing. The sky is already bright. There are many royal knights in the manor now. Don't be discovered. I heard that Lord Fushi has already gone out. Her companion smiled casually and said, As for the others, those royal knights, do they dare to stop us?" The maid rolled her eyes. "Look at your domineering tone. All right, I'm wrong, sister." Her companion laughed and hugged her. "I just want to finish quickly and go back to sleep. I didn't rest well last night. My skin will become worse. Go and open the door." The maid shook her head and said, "This was an inconspicuous corner of the courtyard in the manor. It was a small sundry room where trimming tools were placed. The two maids of the manor opened a tunnel in this small room. They dragged the corpse all the way in. Finally, they came in front of a dark hole and threw the corpse directly into this hole. They didn't know how deep it was. They only knew that after a long time, they heard a slight sound of falling to the ground. After the two maids heard the sound of falling, they didn't stay for a moment and directly left this place. In the dim and cold space, the completely twisted corpse suddenly propped up at this moment. Medanzo blinked and subconsciously reached out. Looking at the bent fingers, he touched the fatal wound on his head and muttered, "Strange, I actually have a resurrection token!" Crack! He got up with a stomach full of doubts. He bent the dislocated bones bit by bit. Naturally, he suffered a lot. "It hurts so much." Medanzo scolded loudly. He hadn't scolded anyone for many years. This princess is really ruthless. She killed him just like that. She didn't give him any room to maneuver at all. Even the script doesn't dare to write like this. Amidst the insults and curses, some beast-like roars suddenly sounded from behind Metatro. Chapter 22:13. Crack, crack, crack. Straightening the twisted finger bones is a very satisfying thing. Medanzo was thinking about the resurrection coin. This matter is a bit strange. Medanzo was a little surprised by Princess Angelique's temperament of killing without hesitation. But what puzzled him was that he could be resurrected after death. He even had a faint feeling that he was being controlled. Is it because of the pages? Although half of the Book of Gaia was taken away by Lilith later, he and Senior Yulia still got the page of the previous Book of Gaia as a guarantee. If there was anything that could bring him back from the dead, it seemed that only the page in his hand could bring him back to life. The key is this resurrection coin. Is it a one-time use or can it be used continuously? Something is approaching just behind me. It wasn't that Metatro didn't know what was approaching him. The key was that his leg was broken, so he could only sit on the spot. There was no way he could rush. He didn't know where he was because, during the time before he died and was resurrected, he was cut off from everything in the outside world. He didn't even know how long had passed. After waking up, in addition to the bones all over his body falling apart, there was a faint tingling feeling in 3 places on his abdomen and chest. It felt like he was stabbed a few times. Medanzo reluctantly raised his head. At this time, a black shadow covered him. In the dim light, he even saw a pair of dark green eyes. "Brother, how about eat a candy first?" With that said, Medanzo quickly reached into his arms and took out a small ball wrapped in a handkerchief and spread it out. There were some crushed snacks and candies inside. He quickly picked out a piece and then threw it up. The black shadow behind him quickly pounced on it, like a hungry dog fighting for food. "Hey, relax." Seeing this, Medanzo slowly put the food on the ground and gently pressed it with both hands. "I'm very delicious, but shouldn't delicious things be left for last? These snacks are also good, probably the masterpiece of the palace chef. I originally planned to leave it for my companion, but I think she is not hungry now. Why don't you eat first?" The thing slowly crawled from a distance and soon climbed to the place where Medanzo put the food. It was too dim here, so Medanzo could only feel that it was crawling over. Only the pair of dark green eyes could be seen. The sound of wolfing down food sounded. Soon the sound stopped, and the pair of dark green eyes stared at Medanzo again. Mimi wanted to curse at this moment, but she heard a hoarse voice in front of her. "Delicious." More. The voice was not clear, but at least it was clear. Medanzo couldn't help but be stunned. He subconsciously said, "I can only bring you more by leaving this place." His dark green eyes began to move around Metatro. The guy in front of him was actually moving around him. "Your body has a smell." "Sorry, I haven't bathed for 2 days, Angie." "Angie smell." "I have nothing to do with her. Really, my surname is not Wang," Madanzo hurriedly said. At this moment, the owner of the dark green eyes directly pounced on him. This guy was getting closer and closer, as if it was sniffing something. "Why, smell of elves." "I have a friend who is indeed an elf, but she is only a half-elf," Madanzo tried to say as calmly as possible. "She was with me just now, but now we are separated. As you can see, I was thrown down here. Probably. What do you want to feed me?" The dark green eyes were right in front of Madanzo, almost sticking to him. After a while, the dark green eyes suddenly moved away. It seemed to be holding back something, and after a few growls, it suddenly fell into silence. Madanzo took a deep breath, sat up silently, and quietly straightened his legs. Suddenly, a pair of hands touched his legs. Madanzo's heart skipped a beat, and then a piercing pain came, accompanied by the sound of bones moving. The bones were straightened. "You can't move yet. Try not to move." The voice sounded again, and this time it was much more nimble. Madanzo felt that it was because the other party was much more awake at this time. He subconsciously raised his head and looked up. It was also pitch black above him. He didn't know how deep this place was. "I will try not to eat you." The voice sounded again. "The food you gave me can support me for a while, but I can't guarantee how long, because I am really too hungry." "Is it Her Highness the Empress who trapped you here?" Madanzo began to ask. "How did you offend that woman?" "Offend?" The voice sneered. "I didn't offend her, but I almost killed her father." "Almost killed her father?" Madanzo was stunned, and then said with great surprise, "You mean the founder Emperor Califar? You almost killed. Wait a minute, I seem to have heard of something like this before. Who told me about it? The smell of elves?" "My name is Kai." "You are the Kai Emperor who almost killed the grand finale with a knife?" "Knife?" The voice paused and then said, "I don't use a knife, I use my legs. I use my legs." It seems like it has completely stopped. In the carriage, among the pile of corpses, Daphne quietly whispered in Cariana's ear. The carriage had indeed stopped. Daphne silently counted in her heart, and she counted a total of 69 times. She would play dead. Cariana quickly covered Daphne's mouth at this time. "Someone is coming." Cariana's hearing was better than ordinary people, so she could hear sounds from farther away. Soon the carriage was opened, and the light from outside pierced into the carriage. Both of them quickly closed their eyes, and their bodies remained motionless. There was no need for them to dress up. After all, they had been bumping around all the way, and their bodies were already stained with the blood of corpses. The sound outside began to become clearer, and at the same time it was very noisy, even lively. It was like a call. "Good harvest. These are all the servants of the nobles. I heard that there are even corpses of conferred nobles. They should have a lot of valuable things on them. Hurry up and take them off. I heard that the city is going to be under martial law soon. We have to replenish our supplies before that. Otherwise, we won't be able to spend money even if we have money." At this time, a group of about 10 people had gathered outside the carriage full of corpses. Among them, there were 3 women. They looked slightly tired, and their clothes were quite dirty. All kinds of waste were piled up around them, like a garbage dump. At this time, a man with a cross-shaped scar on his face was sitting on a steel bar that was inserted horizontally. He was peeling an apple with a small knife, and he looked expressionlessly at the people below who were calling for him. Next to the man who was peeling the apple sat a little girl with her eyes closed. At this time, the little girl suddenly frowned and whispered, "There are heartbeats, too." Although the little girl's voice was very low, it stopped the call in an instant. The people below looked up at this time. The man who was peeling the apple casually knocked on the steel bar twice with a knife. Soon, the people picked up their weapons and surrounded the door of the carriage. "Let me do it." One of the strong men raised a sharp steel bar and stabbed it directly into the pile of corpses. The strong man stabbed a few times in succession, but at this time a figure suddenly jumped out of the carriage and kicked the strong man with the steel bar. The strong man's face was kicked, and he screamed in anger. He angrily waved the sharp steel bar in his hand. Unexpectedly, the figure was too slippery. At this time, the figure actually rode on the strong man's shoulder and strangled the strong man's neck tightly. "Take it down." Everyone attacked one after another, trying to take down the figure on the strong man. After a series of attacks, the strong man was already foaming on the ground, but the figure was gone. Above, at the top of the hanging hook, there was a girl covered in blood standing at this time. The girl was swinging the hook, as if she wanted to use it to swing further away. The man who was peeling the apple narrowed his eyes and threw the knife in his hand as fast as lightning. The knife immediately shot to the hanging hook, right at the foot of the girl covered in blood. The girl covered in blood was shocked. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. But the girl's movements were very agile. The moment she fell to the ground, she had already adjusted her posture and landed on the ground safely. But the moment the girl covered in blood raised her head, a large number of weapons were already pointed at her. "I surrender! I surrender! Don't kill me!" The girl covered in blood instantly raised her hands. She was still holding a pearl necklace in her hands. The girl covered in blood immediately put the necklace into her arms and smiled embarrassedly. "Come here. Be honest. Leader, look." The girl covered in blood was already tied up and pushed in front of the man who was peeling the apple and the little girl who had closed her eyes. A small knife suddenly appeared in the man's hand. He cut the peeled apple into slices and brought the knife to the little girl's mouth. "What's your name?" The man who was peeling the apple asked casually. "Kaliana. Did you escape from that princess's manor?" The man thought for a moment and said, "Mixed in with the pile of corpses?" The girl covered in blood. Kaliana could only nod at this time. The man said again, "Do you know what happened in the manor tonight?" Kaliana said honestly, "At the princess's banquet, the strange bandit clown appeared and kidnapped Prince Cicero. The princess was so angry that she arrested everyone and interrogated them. She also killed everyone who was not a pureblood noble." The man's face turned serious, and he even frowned. The little girl who had closed her eyes also opened her mouth slightly. As for the people around, they all widened their eyes in disbelief. No wonder. I was wondering why the Holy Land seemed to have suddenly changed, and why so many people died. Yeah, the news from the incineration factory was that many people died, and there were nobles among them. I knew that something big must have happened, but I didn't expect that His Highness the Prince would be kidnapped. Strange bandit. The guy at the top of the bounty list. He has been quiet for a few years. Good guy. He made big news when he appeared again. I'm convinced that he's at the top of the bounty list. The man who was peeling the apple casually knocked on the side with the handle of the knife to let everyone be quiet. At this time he stared at Kaliana and asked indifferently, "Since everyone was killed, how did you survive? I mean, you were in the pile of dead bodies before they came out." I believe that the government's minions don't know the importance of the last hit. "I'm not a guest, I was caught." Kaliana quickly said, "I was caught by the nobles and sent out as a gift. When the incident happened, I was locked up. After the incident, I found an opportunity to escape from the cage, then pretended to be a maid of the manor and sneaked into the pile of corpses at dawn. Good man. I'm really not a servant of those nobles, and I'm not even from the Holy Land. I was caught, and my hometown is in the Green Prairie." The smell of an elf. The little girl with closed eyes suddenly said at this time, and then said, "Impure." Everyone subconsciously looked at Kaliana. The man who was peeling the apple said, "Are you a half-elf? Are you on the mother's side or the father's side?" Kaliana said helplessly, "My father is an elf. He eloped with a young lady of a noble conferred, family, and gave birth to me." The man was silent. Kaliana said nervously, "Good men, good men. I'm really innocent. At most, I just wanted to collect some corpses to get some money to go home. I didn't know you wanted to rob work. I really didn't mean to rob you. Can you let me go home?" "We can let you go, but you can't leave." The man who was peeling the apple shook his head at this time. "Even if you're a half-elf, it doesn't mean you won't betray us. Also, your companion is a half-elf." Kaliana was stunned and subconsciously looked behind, only to see Daphne being carried back by two men with a pale face. "You're a half-elf, so I think you're qualified to be captured and sent as a gift." The man who was peeling the apple chuckled and said, "But this shouldn't be the case, right?" "Daphne is from the circus." Kaliana said, "Have you heard of the Circus of Dreams? A guy called Count Decria captured the whole circus and sent it to Queen Angelique, saying that the queen wanted to see their performance. We met when we were escaping." The man who was peeling the apple didn't say anything, but he suddenly looked at the little girl with closed eyes beside him. The little girl said indifferently, "Most of it is true." The man who was peeling the apple nodded and then ordered, "You two stay here for the time being. Don't worry, I won't starve you. However, the freedom of the two of you may be somewhat restricted. It's better than dying." Kaliana smiled bitterly. The man who was peeling the apple said, "We're not nobles who kill innocent people. We're just a group of people who want to live. In addition, I'm also a half-elf, but I don't have the ability." "What? You're also—" Kaliana looked up at the man with the cross-shaped scar on his face in shock. Although he was a bit old, looking like an old man in his 30s, he did seem to have the charm of an old man. If it weren't for the scar on his face— "My name is Yi Yen." The man who was peeling the apple smiled casually, then waved his hand and said, "Okay, send these two ladies to rest and continue working." Chapter 22:14. Some light appeared from the ground. This was the work of Medanzo the Smarty. He found some thick and long bones nearby. After breaking them and rubbing them a few times, there was a colorful flame that made people feel like they were in the netherworld. The guy who called himself Kai had probably stayed in the dark environment for too long. Even though the flame was not dazzling, he had to use his hands to block it. He even looked vigilant. He was almost crawling on the ground. His body was as dry as an old bamboo. Obviously, it was caused by the harsh environment for a long time. Guy's feet, hands, and even his neck were black rings. He wasn't chained, but these black rings were the reason why this ruthless person who could almost kill the founder emperor with a single kick couldn't get out of this place. It was said that he was a product of the mythological era. Emperor Kai wasn't a true hero of the mythological war. It was a special creature that was born from the remnants of the mythological creatures that were chased to the end of the world after the mythological war. It was born with great power. Why didn't the founding emperor kill you? After getting used to the low temperature of the flames, Guy began to speak slowly. Because Califar was afraid that a second me would appear and there would be a second assassination that almost cost him his life. So he couldn't kill me. Metatro frowned. He had seen a lot of strange things and had a lot of imagination, so he had some guesses in his mind. He asked tentatively, "After you die, there will be a second you? Your great power comes from the era?" Kai glanced at Medanzo with his slightly cloudy eyes and said calmly, "It's like one or even many eras where a glorious sun will appear. After I die, there will be someone who will inherit my will. Califar didn't dare to kill me. He didn't dare to kill me, which means he has been living in fear." Medanzo sucked on the pipe again and blinked. I don't know if the founding emperor was very scared, but if he didn't kill you, he could have killed all the shadow elves. After killing all the shadow elves outside and no one could inherit your power, he would kill you? Or perhaps they've already killed all the dark elves outside, and the only reason why they haven't killed you yet is because they want you to still have hope, so that you can continue to live a life that is neither human nor ghost? Guy suddenly opened his mouth slightly, revealing a perplexed expression for a moment. "What?" This legendary hero who almost kicked out a new ending of human and mythological life suddenly stood up and showed a frightened expression. His defense was broken instantly. He directly grabbed his head with both hands. Confusion, anger, fear, and despair all came together. Why didn't I think of this? Why didn't I think of this? How could I? Impossible. Suddenly, Guy rushed over and grabbed Metatro's neck. I want to get out. I also want to go out, Madanzo said with a little effort, and then patted Kai's hand. Even if you eat some of me, you can only starve less for a few days. After a few days, you can still do whatever you want. His beast-like breath rubbed Madanzo's face back and forth. After a long time, Madanzo was thrown to the ground. Are you sober now? Madanzo asked in a low voice. Kai sighed slowly. You are a terrible person. You are not like a child, but more like a freak who knows how to play with people's hearts. Madanzo shrugged and said indifferently, After all, I used to be the leader of a super-large publishing organization. I know some tricks. Do you have a way to get out? Kai suddenly frowned. Madanzo blinked and then spread out her hands. She said helplessly, Actually, I don't. If I did, I wouldn't be here talking nonsense with you. Kai sat on the ground dejectedly. His expression kept changing. He was probably on the verge of falling into chaos. He was afraid that he would lose his mind again at any time and then start a massacre to instinctively eat. Madanzo found another bone. After breaking it, she began to rub it on the ground to generate heat so that the light would continue. This should be Princess Angelique's manor. Why is this the princess manor? I don't know. Kai lowered his head and said, Maybe Carafa hated my existence, so he asked his daughter to watch over me. But this princess is still a little inexperienced compared to her. That guy won't starve me. He will only stand in front of me, silently watching me and mocking me for being weak. Madanzo shrugged and said, I think this princess is more pragmatic. Anyway, your spirit hasn't been destroyed after so long, so it's better to destroy your body directly. At least this is a visible benefit. Besides, it doesn't matter to her whether you will be destroyed or not. The key is that when she abuses you, she will feel good. Kai glared at her and broke her defense again. Madanzo only felt that this legendary hero's reaction was actually a little slow. Maybe it was the side effect of the power that could threaten the founder? What was that saying again? He opened a window for you, so he would naturally close another window for you. He should be quite free now, running to find the primordial or something in the floating castle in the palace of the Holy Land. It was filled with all kinds of strange tools and items. In the messy room, there was a wooden sign next to it, Royal Research Institute. Yulia was looking at the ceiling with squinted eyes. It turned out that the research institute that His Highness always talked about was actually opened by him, and he was the only researcher. She was tied to a chair. The chair was a little special. It was equipped with all kinds of strange props, and it could even open people's legs. If this thing was advertised, it would probably become a popular product for the year. She even thought of the name Blissful Tiger Stool, enhanced version. At this time, Prince Desolate, who was wearing a silver robe, was cooking noodles with a beaker in front of her. Yulia's head was dizzy at this time, and she felt extremely slow. Prince Desolate suddenly said at this time, So, you came to this world through a thing called Book of Gaia. You call it the world of the pages, and me, my sister Huang, and even all the creatures in this world are just characters in the pages? Yes, Yulia nodded subconsciously, but soon she felt that something was wrong. Her expression changed slightly, and her dizzy brain became a little clearer. Your Highness, what did you just say? At this time, Prince Desolate was holding a beaker and eating noodles. He walked in front of Yulia and then directly sat in front of the Blissful Tiger Stool enhanced version. You told me after I used the almighty lollipop on you. Yulia was silent, This was probably something that happened before she woke up. Yulia was still silent. She couldn't remember what she had said. Yulia was still silent. Since the other party could still be so calm, he probably thought that she was crazy and was talking nonsense, so he didn't believe her. Slurp, slurp, after the prince swallowed a few mouthfuls of noodles. He suddenly blinked and asked, "By the way, you haven't told me if characters in the pages like us can also use the power of this so-called Book of Gaia to go out." Yulia was startled, and she couldn't help but ask tentatively, "So are you AF asterisk king psychopath? You can even write that kind of words? You don't even dare to write it like that, okay?" "That's why I dare to write it like that." Prince Desolate showed a big smile. "Don't you think so, Yulia?" "Oh no, it should be Lady Nan. Can you really turn into a cloud of mist and then change your body freely? What is the black soul body?" "It's over." She really spat out the things that she shouldn't spit out. "Is the power of the almighty lollipop really that terrifying? Why don't you show it to me?" Prince Desolate continued, "Our royal family has a more practical ability, which is to nullify the unusual power fluctuations around us. I call it godless territory. I can temporarily remove the effect of godless territory. Can you show me your ability?" "Yulia." Lady Nan also blinked at this time, then laughed and said, "Okay, Your Highness. You can let me perform whatever changes you want. Even if you want me to turn into your shape, there's no problem. Then let's do that." Prince Desolate looked happy. He quickly took out a remote control, and after pressing it, the mechanism on the chair opened instantly and Lady Nan was freed. Not only that, at the moment the mechanism opened, Lady Nan turned into a cloud of gray mist without saying anything and began to spin crazily in this messy studio. The mist turned a few times and rushed directly to the exhaust vent of the studio. "Goodbye." Just like that, Miss Nan disappeared through the vent. But Prince Huang didn't seem to care at this time. He was still eating there. While eating, he suddenly burped and then stretched himself. He chuckled and said, "Return." The floating castle, the palace of the Holy Land. It was filled with all kinds of strange tools and items. In the messy room, there was a wooden sign next to it, Royal Research Institute. Yulia was looking at the ceiling with squinted eyes. She was still tied to a chair, and she still called this chair Blissful Tiger Chair Enhanced Version. What was different was that there were many small discs stuck to her head. The discs were connected to various wires. Prince Desolate didn't use a beaker to cook noodles. He just stood in front of her and lowered his head to record something in a notebook. What is that?" "Yulia," Lady Nan said with a trembling voice. "What is it?" Prince Desolate thought for a while and said, "It's probably a machine that binds your consciousness and my consciousness together and then reproduces everything here in a virtual room." "Well, do you understand? Can say anything, lollipop? It hasn't been made yet. It's only a semi-finished product. It's good for people with weak willpower." Prince Desolate said with a smile, "Godless realm. If I didn't say that, you wouldn't perform for me." Prince Desolate narrowed his eyes and said, "But it really has the power that only Glorious Sun can have." "But because I have Godless Realm 2-0. The effect is similar." "Ew, damn it. So evil, so evil." She felt that compared to His Royal Highness, the servant girl felt inferior. Miss Nan felt that she had met her lifelong enemy. But it's strange. Prince Desolate suddenly approached and stretched out his finger to open Lady Nan's eyes. Although you open your heart in the virtual world, there are always some things that you can't explain clearly. For example, who gave you the black soul body? For example, who is the person behind you? Lady Nan was stunned. "This place is still virtual, right?" Prince Huang smiled and said, "You're quite careful. You deserve to be called King Go. It's the first time I've heard such an interesting way of saying go. You can actually make it sound so good. You deserve to be called King Go. You're afraid of death, right?" With that said, the prince took out a pair of tweezers. There seemed to be something on the tweezers, something that was not much bigger than an ant. He put the tweezers in front of Lady Nan's eyes and was about to put the thing into her eyes. "What is this?" "A little invention." Prince Desolate said casually, "There doesn't seem to be a good way to catch gas. This thing can freeze your body in an instant. After all, it's quite tiring to keep Godless Realm 2. Zero on." She saw it clearly. It was a spider-like thing. After it was placed on her eyes, it directly drilled into her eyes. Lady Nan screamed. The mechanism of the chair was activated at this time, and she fell to the ground in pain instantly. After a while, Lady Nan looked up as if she was exhausted. "Well, you can start your performance now." Prince Desolate squatted on the ground and patted Lady Nan's head. "Lady Nan, please." Lady Nan was really scared this time. She was scared of this prince from the bottom of her heart. If the pages were not in Madanzo's hands, she would have directly escaped from this terrible world. What do you want me to change into?" Nan Xiaonan asked with a trembling voice. "Change into what?" Prince Desolate rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. Then he blinked and said with a strange smile, "How about you change into my appearance?" "Into you?" There was a knock on the door. Then 2 beautiful girls pushed open the door of the Royal Institute of Research. The 2 beautiful girls walked in with food in their hands. "Your Highness, it's time to eat." The prince's back was facing the 2 girls, and his head was lowered as he wrote something on the table. Hearing this, the prince didn't turn his head and just said indifferently, "I know. Put the food down. I'll eat later. You can leave now." "Don't we need to serve the meal today?" The 2 girls looked at each other. Although they were a little confused, they didn't dare to say anything. After gently putting down the food, they immediately left. Not many people dared to stay in the prince's office for too long. There was the sound of the door closing. The prince, who was writing in front of the table, instantly let out a sigh of relief. His shoulders also collapsed. At the same time, under the table, a figure slowly crawled out. It was Prince Desolate. Chapter 22:15. Since it was a confinement, the conditions were naturally not good. It was already fortunate that she was not abused. Perhaps because of this mentality, ever since she was locked up, the half-elf girl Kalyana didn't show much fear on her face. She even had the mood to clean up this confinement place. "Miss Karyana, you're very good at cleaning," Daphne suddenly said. It was too quiet here, and the 2 of them were not in a good situation. At this time, they urgently needed some topics to ease the tension. "I'm a waiter in the hotel's restaurant, after all." Karyana shrugged. Although she was a little annoyed, she tugged at her clothes and said, "I should have asked them for some clean clothes." The 2 of them were still wearing the same clothes that were stained with blood. Of course, it was not comfortable to wear them all the time. "Miss Karyana, do you know who this group of people is?" Daphne asked softly, and that person called Ian. "You seem to know this guy?" Karyana sat cross-legged on the clean floor. "I know this guy, but I don't know him. He's just like my idol, Clown." "Clown?" Daphne was stunned. Then she reacted and said in surprise, "You mean this person is also a criminal from the Holy Land on the wanted list?" "In the past year, he just climbed to the 10th place on the wanted list." Karyana thought for a moment and said, "But actually it's not just him. It's his entire group. To be precise, it should be the Drowning Dog Brigade." Drowning Dog. Daphne opened her mouth. "This name," Karyana said calmly, "it's like a dog that fell into the water and is struggling to survive. In the whole world, except for the real pure-blood nobles, we are all like drowning dogs." Daphne wanted to say something, but stopped. Karyana comforted her. "Don't worry. Although the Holy Land has put a bounty on the Drowning Dog Brigade, they will only do things that target the nobles. They will never do anything to civilians. At least, I haven't heard of them hurting civilians." "Miss Karina, you seem to be Daphne looked at her in confusion, very clear about the Holy Land. The half-elf girl smiled casually and said, "I'm a waitress in a restaurant. The customers who come and go from north to south always bring me a lot of gossip." That was true. Restaurants, pubs, and the like were indeed easy to earn income from intelligence. But in that kind of remote seaside town, would there really be so many customers coming from the north and the south? "I wonder where the commander is right now," Daphne muttered as she hugged her knees and sat in a corner. At this moment, the iron door of the detention room was slowly pushed open. Yen and the little girl with her eyes closed walked in one after another. Yen was holding some food in his hands, while the little girl was holding some clothes. The cross-shaped scar on his face ruined his originally handsome appearance. At this moment, he smiled faintly and said, Sorry. The conditions are limited, so I can only wrong you." Daphne subconsciously looked at Kariana. She instinctively let Kariana take the lead. The half-elf girl stood up and stretched. "You've helped a lot. I was worried about the clothes just now, as expected of the leader of the Drowning Dog Brigade. Just like the rumors say, you're a good friend of the poor. Being a good friend of the poor is also a poor thing." Yen smiled casually and sat on the ground. "You're quite skilled. Are you interested in joining us?" The half-elf girl was stunned. "So careless? Because you'll be fine if I tell you tomorrow." Yen smiled. "Tomorrow?" Kariana was slightly confused. She subconsciously looked at the little girl with her eyes closed beside him. At this moment, Yen directly waved his hand and gently pressed it on the little girl's head. "Yes, tomorrow, our little princess, the most important treasure." The little girl was actually quite delicate, like a porcelain doll. She even had very obvious long, silver-gray hair, but the ends of her hair were black, as if it meant that she was not pure. Kariana did not intend to explore more for the time being. Instead, she considered the current situation. She said, "There's no problem. Isn't that still careless?" Tomorrow's sensing ability is very strong. Her prediction of danger has allowed us to successfully avoid countless dangers. Yen directly said, "She said that your arrival will allow us to have a turning point in our fate, but she doesn't know if it's good or bad. I'm a gambler, so I want to see if this turning point is good or bad." Kariana was silent. Yen was not surprised. He said casually, "Don't be in a hurry to answer me. I'll give you time to think carefully." "What if I don't agree?" Kariana suddenly asked. Yen just smiled casually and did not answer. Before he left, he said again, "Think carefully." Kariana nodded without thinking. "I agree, but I have a request. When I feel that it's appropriate, I want to leave. You can't stop me." 3 times. Yen, however, raised 3 fingers and said indifferently, "Even if you want to leave, you have to complete at least 3 official missions in our group. We're quite poor. We can't let you get food for free." "I haven't even said that I want to be paid," Kariana muttered and nodded reluctantly. The 2 high-fived. After that, Yen suddenly said, "Take a good rest in the next few days. Who knows? We might have our first official mission soon. You're very skilled and basically have no problems, but your companion is a little too strong. It seems that she needs to train well in the next few days." Instantly, Yen and Kariana looked at Daphne at the same time. Me." Daphne pointed at herself, not knowing what to do. I want it too." "Training? What training? He only knows how to train his hand speed." Daphne and Kariana were soon released from the confinement room. Then they were led away by a man who said that they were going to undergo a test. At this moment, the little girl Tomorrow suddenly tugged at Yen's sleeve and asked in confusion, "Why, Kariana? The other one is clearly the turning point. Just think of it as—" Yen chuckled and rubbed Tomorrow's little head dotingly. "The cunning of adults." "Oh," Yen said again. "Can you sense the location of the prince who was kidnapped?" Tomorrow shook her head and whispered, "No." Yen said thoughtfully that Mr. Strange Thief is really amazing. It took our group such a long time to get to the 10th place on the bounty list. Those in front of us are basically all large organizations. Only this Mr. Strange Thief single-handedly sits firmly on the throne of first place. He's simply inhuman. On the night of Princess Angelique's birthday banquet, His Highness Cicero was kidnapped by the Strange Thief clown, who had disappeared for several years. Even if the government tried their best to block the news, they still couldn't resist the ultimate mystery of gossip. I'll tell you, but you must not tell anyone that I told you. I definitely won't. The Holy Land was searching for traces of the Strange Thief clown, and it was a thorough search. The Purge Nights coming and going on the streets of the Holy Land were unprecedentedly dense. Most of the businesses had closed their doors, and the residents were grounded. Not only that, but the periphery of the Holy Land was also blocked by a large number of Purge Nights, and there were hundreds of airships patrolling in the sky. On the streets of West God Street in the Holy Land, under this bleak atmosphere, only one breakfast shop was still open for business, a business for 2 people. It was no longer normal breakfast time, but the owner of the breakfast shop was walking out with food in his hands at this time, trembling in fear as he delivered it to the only 2 customers. He didn't know who one of them was, but the owner of the breakfast shop knew the other one, the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights, the kind of big shot who could even crush a noble at will. "Just put the things here. You may leave," the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights ordered indifferently. The breakfast shop owner nodded repeatedly and quickly ran into the inner hall, not daring to eavesdrop. "Lord Fushi, it's been almost 12 hours since the prince was kidnapped," the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights said hesitantly. "It seems that there's still no news." Ever since this Lord Royal General handed the command of the operation to Bismarck, this Grand Commander's grasp of the situation was not as instantaneous as before. However, this Lord Royal General would always say, don't worry, give Bismarck more confidence, or use Bismarck as a scapegoat if it really didn't work out." Since Bismarck was going to be sent to the Nirvana Ocean anyway, the Grand Commander of the Nirvana Ocean knew that place wasn't a place where humans could stay. It was the final battlefield of the mythological war, and the souls of countless mythological creatures who died tragically wandered there. If a person were to barge in casually, they would be gone in a few breaths of time. "You guys go in and search." Suddenly, a heavy voice came from outside, and then several Purge Knights quickly walked in, followed by a majestic Grand Commander of the Purge Knights. Seeing this, the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights snorted coldly and directly slammed his palm on the table, saying with slight anger, "Who let you in?" The Purge Knights who had just walked in quickly were stunned when they saw clearly who was sitting in the hall. Their legs almost turned to jelly. The Grand Commander of the Purge Knights hurriedly walked forward. "My lord!" This subordinate didn't know that my lord was here. "Please forgive me, my lord." The Grand Commander snorted coldly. "You don't know? The search has just begun. How can you not know?" The Grand Commander of the Purge Knights hurriedly said in fear and trepidation, "This subordinate deserves to die. The search is too strict. Commander Bismarck also ordered us to search back and forth, so what's your name?" Fushi Royal General suddenly signaled the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights to be quiet and looked at the new Grand Commander of the Purge Knights. "You are." The Grand Commander of the Purge Knights looked up apprehensively and asked doubtfully, "This is one of the 7 Royal Generals, the Royal General of Heaven, Lord Fushi." The Grand Commander of the Royal Knights said in a deep voice, "How did you become the Grand Commander of the Purge Knights? You don't even recognize this." "Greetings, Royal General Fushi." The Grand Commander of the Purge Knights was shocked and broke out in cold sweat. "This subordinate is the new Grand Commander of the Purge Knights, Balaam. This is my first time here. I really didn't know that you are newly transferred from the local area." The Grand Commander of the Royal Knights frowned, but his expression eased a little. It was understandable that someone who was promoted from the local area didn't recognize him. However, Fushi Royal General smiled and said, "It's fine if you don't recognize me when you're new here. It's just like how I can't call out all of your names. Anyway, it's fine as long as you didn't do it on purpose. Don't you think so, Grand Commander Balam?" The Grand Commander is right. Grand Commander Balam nodded and then waved his hand. "Withdraw!" He continued, "Then, my two lords, I will continue searching elsewhere. I won't disturb the two of you." The Grand Commander of the Royal Knights waved his hand impatiently. "Wait," Fushi Royal General said calmly. "We've been searching for so long, a little more time won't make a difference. Everyone is tired. Let them come in, eat something, and rest. Only by recuperating can we do better work." This. Grand Commander Balam looked at the Grand Commander hesitantly. The Grand Commander said helplessly, "Didn't you hear the Grand Commander's words? Come back and sit down. The owner inside, prepare more food in the kitchen." Although the Grand Commander was doing them a favor, these low-level purge knights didn't dare to get close to him. They could only lean against the edge of the cafeteria and sit down. Even when the owner of the breakfast shop brought them food and tea, they only dared to take small bites silently. Commander Balam was dragged to the same table by Lord Wang, and they casually chatted about some work-related matters. Grand Commander Balam's answers sounded decent, although he was promoted from the local area. After chatting for a while, the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights found Balam more pleasing to the eye. "What do you do, Dash?" Just as the conversation at the table seemed to be going on merrily, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Several purge knights stood up and placed their hands on their weapons. At this moment, a black-haired, black-eyed young man stood in front of the door of the breakfast shop. His clothes didn't look like the style of the Holy Land. It was very suspicious. "Excuse me, are you not doing business here?" The young man in front of the door looked around casually and asked politely, "Not doing business here. Not doing business here." The owner of the breakfast shop hurriedly ran out and said in horror, "I'm sorry. We don't do business with outsiders today. Please leave now." "That's a pity." The young man nodded. "I can only find out that this shop is open. You'd better leave now, young man." The owner of the breakfast shop hurriedly said in a low voice, "Don't cause trouble for yourself." The young man nodded and was about to leave. "Let him in." The Fushi Royal General's voice came from inside. "He's here to do business." Chapter 22:16. The shop suddenly became quiet. The breakfast shop owner's lips moved slightly, but in the end, he gave up trying to persuade the young man. After sighing quietly, he looked at the young man in front of him with a reproachful look. He had already tried to help, but was unable to do anything. "Sorry to bother you." The young man nodded to the breakfast shop owner. "Anyway, be careful." The owner of the breakfast shop sighed again. At this time, the purge knights had already made way for the young man in front of the shop to calmly walk into the cafeteria. Then he found a seat near the window and sat down. "Boss, can I have your signature set meal?" The black-haired young man smiled and said, "I am really a bit hungry." Wait a moment," the breakfast shop owner hurriedly responded. Then, under the gaze of the purge knights, he quickly ran into the cafeteria. They were observing this fellow, who suddenly appeared. With the current situation in the Holy Land, no one would have the courage to run around on the street. Could it be that this fellow did not encounter any patrolling purge knights along the way? This is too abnormal. "Sir, do you want me?" At this time, the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights whispered to the Fushi Royal General, "This person is very suspicious." The Fushi Royal General chuckled and did not say anything. He just casually knocked on the table, stood up, walked straight to the young man's table, and sat down across from him. "Let's set up a table?" the Fushi Royal General said with a smile. The black-haired young man said rather casually, "The cafeteria allows for tables to be set up when there is no more space." The Fushi Royal General chuckled, and the two of them sat casually like this. After a while, the Fushi royal general suddenly took out his fifth-order Rubik's Cube. He lowered his head and began to turn it. Unlike a hobbyist who was used to the Rubik's Cube, he was more like a beginner, twisting it up and down. This kind of toy has a calculation formula. The black-haired young man suddenly said. The Fushi royal general said casually, "For anything, if the result is calculated from the beginning, it will appear too insincere towards life." The black-haired young man seemed to find it interesting. But it will still be restored, after all. Restoring it is the original purpose of making it. As for the fun in the middle, not everyone likes to enjoy it. King Fushi casually placed the twisted Rubik's Cube in the center of the table and said, "I have a lot of free time, and as long as I don't reverse the last step, it will never be restored, and the purpose of its creation will never be achieved. Now that I think about it, I may have won against the person who made it." At this time, the boss of the breakfast shop came out with a plate. The food was ready-made and just needed to be heated up. He carefully came to the front of the young customer. "Sir, the set meal you ordered is ready." "Pack it up, I'll take it," the black-haired young man said directly. Wait. The breakfast shop owner left in a hurry. The black-haired young man suddenly picked up the magic in the middle of the table. This action almost made the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights, who was not far away, jump up and exclaim, "Good Lord!" At the same time, he would have asked how the other party wanted to die, if it was not for the fact that the royal general did not seem to care. Every time it is messed up, it will always follow a fixed pattern and return to its original state. The black-haired young man slowly turned the Rubik's Cube. No matter if you reverse the last step or not, its pattern exists. The person who made it has never lost since the beginning. King Fushi narrowed his eyes. The black-haired young man put the Rubik's Cube back in the middle of the table, and at this time the Rubik's Cube had been restored. The two colors, black and white, were clearly separated. Coincidentally, the boss of the breakfast shop also packed the food and sent it over. The black-haired young man stood up, picked up the bag, and looked at King Fushi. "This meal is your treat. Can I keep it in the public account?" King Fushi smiled and said, "After all, my salary is not high, and my expenses are usually high." The black-haired young man did not answer, took the food and left. The Purge Knights by the door subconsciously wanted to stop him, but Commander Balaam, who had been silent all this time, stopped the black-haired young man with a look and calmly left. After a while, King Fushi still sat there, as if he was thinking about something. The knights did not dare to disturb him at this time. After an unknown amount of time, the Fushi monarch heaved a sigh of relief and ordered, "Let's settle the bill. It's about time to see if Bismai has any results." The boss of the breakfast shop heaved a sigh of relief, looked at the empty cafeteria, and directly fell to the ground. After a while he recovered. The boss of the breakfast shop suddenly trembled and hurriedly ran to the door. Today's business could not continue. In the entire West God Street, only his shop was still open. It was like a ghost story. He trembled and began to close the door. "This place, is it closing?" Suddenly, "Yes, I can't do business. I'm sorry, you can come back another day," the boss of the breakfast shop subconsciously said, and at the same time he looked up and was stunned. "Why are you back again? Have I been here before? Didn't you just pack?" The boss of the breakfast shop was surprised. "Why did you change your clothes?" Black hair, black pupils, it was indeed that mysterious young man. However, it felt a little different. "Then, do you mind doing business with me again?" he asked with a smile. The boss of the breakfast shop subconsciously nodded, scratched his head, and then directly said, "Wait for me." With that, the boss ran straight into the store. Then he quickly ran out again and stuffed a bag into the hands of the young man in front of the door. "I'm sorry, I really have to close the store. There's still some food here and it's fresh. Take it as my treat. Don't wander around the streets alone. The Holy Land is not safe now. Young man, be careful." He held the bag in his arms, looked at the steaming buns, and a smile appeared on his calm face. "Thank you, sir." He turned and left. The boss of the breakfast shop could not help but be stunned, and subconsciously touched his face, muttering to himself, "Sir? I am only in my 30s. How did I become a sir?" The Holy Land Health Organization said that young people before 50 are still young. Really? Commander Balaam was patrolling the streets on his battle beast. It was said that this battle beast was cultivated with the bloodline of the mythical creatures, the dragon beast. It could run for a whole day without sleep and still be full of energy. "Sir, why don't we follow Lord King General and the great commander?" The subordinate knight just came up and asked in confusion. After leaving the old breakfast shop on West God Street, the Purge Knights and the Fushi King General directly separated. It was Commander Balaam who took the initiative to continue the search. "It is fine as long as we leave an impression," Commander Balaam said indifferently. "There will be chances to meet in the future if we really follow that Lord King General. I am afraid that he will not like it." The subordinate knight did not understand. When they met in the breakfast shop, he only felt that the heavenly King General did not seem like a serious person. He was quite amiable and approachable. "Sir, look." Another subordinate knight quickly came up and pointed in front. "It is that guy from the breakfast shop." It was a leisure pavilion between the streets. In the pavilion, a black-haired young man was sitting there in a daze. Commander Balaam furrowed his brows and pulled on the reins in his hands, urging his beast closer. Commander Balaam quickly got off the reins and walked into the pavilion. The clothes were different, the feeling was different, even the packed food was different. From the moment the black-haired young man walked into the breakfast shop, Commander Balaam had carefully memorized everything. At this moment, he easily noticed a few things that were not right. The ability to find fault, level 10. "You deliberately waited for me here." Commander Balaam directly sat down and asked with a frown. The black-haired young man smiled faintly. "You can say that. I just thought that someone would come over." Commander Balaam muttered, "Why did you wait for me?" The black-haired young man said casually, "You can ask me a question, and in exchange, I hope that you can help me do something." Commander Balaam said indifferently, "Answering a question in exchange for doing something. This is not a good deal." The black-haired young man smiled. "It can be the question that you want to know the answer to the most. It can be any question about this world. It can also be a question about the free cities, or even a question about something outside the Holy Light Kingdom. I think there will be an answer that you want to know." Commander Balaam's expression began to change. As the black-haired young man spoke, the change in his expression became more and more obvious. In the end, his eyes even focused. He even placed his hand on the annihilator at his waist. "You don't want to do it?" The black-haired young man chuckled. "This kind of business." Commander Balaam's expression kept changing. Finally, he calmed down. "Any kind of business, as long as it is profitable, can be done. But how do I know that the so-called answer you gave me is the correct answer?" "You will know if you ask," the black-haired young man said softly. "But remember, there is only one question and one chance." Commander Balaam's lips moved slightly, but he didn't say anything. He just sat there motionlessly. His hair was already drenched in sweat. Finally, Commander Balaam opened his mouth. "What do you think the commander is doing now?" Outside the pavilion, the knights were watching attentively, waiting for Commander Balaam's order to make a move. However, Commander Balaam seemed to have been petrified. He didn't move at all. "The commander is moving." In the pavilion, the black-haired young man seemed to have said something, and Commander Balaam instantly stood up with a look of shock on his face. The Purge Knights were about to rush up and beat him up, but they saw Commander Balaam sit down again with an uncertain expression. The knights didn't know whether they should rush up or not. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. "Is what you just said true?" the gloomy Commander Balaam asked solemnly. "This is the second question." The black-haired young man shook his head. Commander Balaam gritted his teeth and said, "I can help you. Do one more thing." "I have another question." The black-haired young man shook his head again and said, I said, there is only one chance, no more. Commander Ballum suddenly sneered and pulled out the annihilator from his waist. But he didn't point it at the black-haired young man. Instead, he slammed the weapon on the stone table in the pavilion and said, "What do you want me to do? I can tell you first, I am good at this. Just help me send a letter." The black-haired young man raised his hand. In an instant, a golden page appeared in his hand. Commander Ballum's eyes narrowed, and even his breathing quickened. The golden page that appeared was now directly divided into two. No, there was an extra copy in an instant. The copied golden page flew out and instantly entered Commander Ballum's body before disappearing. Commander Ballum stared blankly at his chest. He looked at the entire process like an outsider. He didn't feel anything when the page entered his body. "You, who do you want me to send it to?" "Not your current partner," the black-haired young man said indifferently. "But there will be a time when you can send it. So be it. In this world, I don't want too many unrelated people to see it. You can leave." Commander Ballum felt as if he was being pulled away from something. He was shocked as a vortex appeared behind him, pulling at him madly. The black-haired young man suddenly said, "After you return to chilly winter, you might really die. If you don't want to die, find a chance to escape. I think you will have a way, Mr. President." Who are you?" A loud roar sounded, but the body of the purged knight commander inside the pavilion quickly disintegrated. "It's gone." The commander disappeared. Outside the pavilion, the purged knights watched in disbelief as the scene unfolded before their eyes. But gradually, their gazes became more and more lost and lifeless. On the empty street, a cold wind blew, and everyone suddenly shivered. The knights looked around in confusion. Was there someone here just now? Is there anyone here? I didn't see anyone. Why is there an extra war beast here? I was also curious. Now, what should we do? What do you mean, what should we do? We are searching for the traces of the thief, right? Don't just stand there. Quickly look around. If we are caught slacking off, we will be dead. That's true. They hurriedly left. A sneaky figure was peeking out from behind the wall, carefully observing the terrain. As if she felt it was enough, this figure slowly crawled out like a mouse, Lady Nan. Originally, the safest thing to do was to hide in the room and wait for Prince Huang to return. In the end, I couldn't resist it. Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but sigh. She had replaced Prince Huang and stayed in the palace. Wasn't it just luring her to commit a crime? Chapter 22:17. Without the godless realm 2-0, Lady Nan felt that everything was much more convenient. But it didn't mean that she could do whatever she wanted. This place was too dangerous. She even wanted to go back quickly. The key was that her strength didn't allow it. As long as she didn't get too close to the place where the emperor was, it was relatively safe. This was the last sentence that the Prince Desolate told her. That's right. After the prince with a bad character threw the question, "Have you ever thought about it?" and jumped out of the window to leave, he crawled back and threw this sentence again. In fact, he couldn't be described as bad. He was a sinister guy. Even now, Nan Xiaonan felt that the Prince Desolate didn't actually sneak out of the palace. Instead, he hid and quietly observed her in the dark. Suspicious, suspicious, suspicious. Sneaky, sneaky. Stop! A reprimanding voice came in an instant. This made the witch of the subworld's academies tremble. If it weren't for the fact that she was still wearing the disguise of the Prince Desolate and had too much room to operate, she would have run away. "No, I'm invisible now." Nan Xiaonan frowned and looked for the source of the sound. She found that it was an older palace maid reprimanding another younger maid. The younger maid lowered her head all the time with tears rolling down her cheeks. But this pitiful look made the older maid more interested in reprimanding her. This was a very common and unoriginal palace food chain. After a few glances, Lady Nan lost interest and was ready to leave through the wall. "How many times have I told you that the Crown Prince's study room must be cleaned before noon every day? Look at you! You're 3 minutes late today." "That's not it." That strange sound appeared again. That's why You're doing it again. Every time there's a strange sound. Only you can hear it every time? Humph. You have so many excuses for being lazy. Remember your identity. Since you were sent to the palace by your family, you're no longer a noble lady. Don't think that just because your family pulled strings for you and gave you a good job cleaning His Highness' study, you're amazing. Let me tell you, I entered the palace 5 years earlier than you. Not to mention that His Highness isn't in the palace right now. Even if His Highness was here, if he wanted to pick someone every night, you would have to wait until next year. The young maid almost burst into tears. Lady Nen blinked and continued to walk through the wall. She stopped on the other side of the wall. The Crown Prince's study? In a corner of the palace courtyard, a young maid who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old was quietly sobbing with her face covered. Tissue? A soft voice came. The young maid subconsciously loosened her hands and raised her head in a daze. Then she was shocked and quickly stood up. Your Highness, Your Highness. Rub. Prince Huang directly placed the tissue in front of the girl's face, blinked his eyes, and said, Of course, if you don't mind, I can help you wipe it. No need. The young maid said in a panic, I will do it myself. His Royal Highness shrugged and sat down. He said casually, but then again, that old woman's words are really unpleasant. Your Highness, you heard it? The young maid's face suddenly turned pale. It's nothing to hear it. It's the food chain in the palace. Prince Huang said indifferently, I'm not interested in the fact that you were bullied, but I'm more interested in the strange sound you said in the study. Come on, tell me in detail, what kind of strange sound is it? The young maid was stunned. She heard that Prince Huang was a complete weirdo. Now it seemed that it was true. This was the first time she talked to Prince Huang. If Prince Huang hadn't taken the initiative, she, as a newcomer, wouldn't have been qualified to contact him directly. Remember, His Highness has been missing for a long time, and no one can find him. But Prince Huang is still in the palace. If you can make him happy, it's also very good. What the family said before leaving suddenly sounded in the young maid's mind. Originally, being able to get the job of cleaning the Crown Prince's study was indeed an enviable task, if the Crown Prince had not gone missing. Now, no one was willing to do this job. They often mentioned it, but it was more to ridicule. It's the sound of music. The young maid quickly wiped her tears at this time. It will appear from time to time, but I can't find where it comes from. Music? Prince Huang lowered his head and rubbed his chin. What kind of music? Is the time fixed? How long will it last each time? Will it come from outside the study? So many questions. The young maid opened her mouth subconsciously. I'm sorry, Your Highness. I didn't pay attention to these. But it sounds like the sound of a music box. Music box. It's something like a music box. Prince Huang blinked. Can you take me to see the scene? Of course. The young maid nodded and was slightly happy. Your Highness, my name is... Let's go. Prince Huang jumped up at this time, smiled, and interrupted the young maid's words. Okay. With his hands behind his head, he walked alone on the street. Wearing a blue and white baseball cap, he looked at everything as if it was new to him, like a wild child from the neighborhood. Well, it turns out that the deserted Holy Land is like this. The young man muttered at this time. It seemed that he felt a little annoyed because the current state didn't reach his expectations. A short figure suddenly flashed past the young man's line of sight. The young man suddenly narrowed his eyes, feeling that he had found something interesting. He quickly went into the alley where the short figure disappeared. At this time he saw 2 boys in old clothes who were only 11 or 12 years old, squatting in front of a door. As for the exhaust slot on the door, there was a child of the same age who was climbing out. The child who climbed out was carrying a lot of things in his hands. Theft. In an instant, what these children had done appeared clearly in the young man's mind. The Holy Land was the center of the world, the most prosperous place for humans. but it didn't mean that there were no such things in the Holy Land. On the contrary, because the pure-blood nobles used their privileges recklessly, a large number of groups were created here that were even worse than slaves. Most of them were the offspring of elves, orcs, and other mythical creatures mixed with humans. They were generally known as demi-humans. The status of demi-humans in the Holy Land was only slightly higher than slaves. What did you find? One of the children asked quickly at this time. Food, and some should be valuable. The child who climbed out said excitedly, Let's go. Let's take it back and let the leader see how much it is worth. Let's go. The children shuttled through the alleys of the Holy Land nimbly, but they didn't know that a young man with a baseball cap was following behind them. They encountered several patrolling purge knights on the way, but they managed to avoid them. After some time, the children came to a street with low buildings and soon walked into a 5-story, semi-finished building that was not yet completed. A group of people lived in this half-finished building in tents. There were men and women, old and young, and many of them were demi-humans. Daily necessities could be seen everywhere, and some demi-human children were playing on the stairs without guardrails. At this time, the 3 children put down the food, then took the remaining spoils of war, and went deeper into the half-finished building again. They came to a house that was filled with construction waste. After removing a few planks, they leaned into the hole in the ground. The underground was like another world. There were more tents here, and more people lived here. It was like a market. They gathered in the huge underground drainage system of the Holy Land and lived quietly. Perhaps the well-dressed people on the ground didn't notice them. The children shuttled through this residential area with familiarity. Soon, they came to a place that was separated by planks. The children knocked hard on the planks. After a while, a strong man with an iron chain around his arm moved the planks away and leaned half of his body out. It's you again? Didn't I say that we don't recruit people? You are not old enough. Go, don't make trouble. It's not like that, the leader of the children said triumphantly. Today we bought a lot of things outside. We are here to ask the leader to see if these things are valuable. You. The strong man frowned when he heard that. His face instantly darkened. You went out without permission? I said that you are not allowed to go out today. Damn it, you little brats. Didn't we come back safely? Don't worry, we checked. No one followed us. Not a single one. No one. The strong man sneered and pointed behind the children. If no one, who is this person? They turned around. A young man with a baseball cap was standing behind them. The young man saw them looking at him and even waved his hand, greeting them, Hello. He's not from our camp. The leader of the children changed his expression and said in horror, When? I'll deal with you later. At this moment, the robust man snorted coldly, took a step forward, and arrived before the young man in the baseball cap in the blink of an eye. He grabbed the young man's arm and said in a deep voice, You better not resist. With that, the strong man threw off the iron chain on his arm and wrapped it around the young man, pressing him to the ground. Go, follow me to see the leader. At the same time, the strong man stared at the trembling children and said angrily, You too! Ah! Wooden sword, roaring. Daphne rushed toward a strong man who was also holding a wooden sword, but she was instantly struck to the ground. Daphne was already dirty, and her face was covered with dust. The training had already lasted for more than 2 hours without any rest. Daphne felt as if her body had been hollowed out several times. She was now lying on the ground, unable to lift a single finger. She could only gasp for air. This won't do. I don't understand why the leader keeps a weakling like you alive. The strong man shook his head and put the wooden sword on his shoulder, sighing. He subconsciously looked to the side. At the side, the girl named Kalyana was lying on a beach chair, leisurely drinking fruit juice. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't defeat this half-elf, the strong man gritted his teeth. Let's rest for half an hour. The burly man said irritably and left. Daphne lay on the ground for a few minutes, before she had the strength to get up. She staggered to Kalyana and said with a bitter smile, "If only I had your skills, Kalyana. There's an ancient legend in our race. If you pluck out all your hair, you'll become stronger." The half-elf girl squinted her eyes and said, "Do you want me to help you?" Daphne immediately covered her head, afraid that it was true. Kalyana smiled and got up from the beach chair. She gestured for Daphne to lie down. "Come on, I'll give you a special service." Special service?" "Massage." Kalyana chuckled and said, "Otherwise, how are you going to deal with the training in half an hour? From the looks of it, they want to speed up your cultivation in a short period of time." "No need, I'll just sit for a while." Daphne shook her head and pointed not far away. "What's that for?" At this moment, a burly man was carrying a teenager who was tied up with iron chains. Behind the burly man were 3 dejected children. "Maybe it's a naughty guy outside?" Kalyana didn't think too much of it. "Isn't there a camp outside with a lot of people? There are bound to be a few naughty guys. That person, I think. I've seen him somewhere before." Daphne looked at the teenager in confusion. However, the teenager was wearing a hat and his face was tilted to the side. The light wasn't bright enough, so she couldn't see clearly. "Have you seen him before?" Kalyana blinked in confusion. When she wanted to take a closer look, the strong man had already walked away with the teenager. She shook her head and looked at Daphne's injured hand from holding the wooden sword for too long. She suddenly said, "By the way, do you want to defeat that big guy?" "Pluck out my hair?" Daphne asked in annoyance. "You don't have to be bald." Kalyana smiled mysteriously. "I just need to draw something on your body." Draw something?" Seeing the half-elf girl's gaze, Daphne was startled. She seemed to have seen this gaze somewhere before. Right? It was the same gaze that Miss Yulia had when she was putting makeup on my injured back. "It's an elf's curse. The Winter Kingdom, the imperial city of ice and snow." In the deep, cold hall, a figure was suddenly thrown out from the distortion. It rolled to the ground and hit the wall before coming to a stop. Commander Balaam. It took Commander Balaam a while to stand up with a pale face. At this moment, cold currents gathered in front of him and turned into the Queen of Ice and Snow. The Queen, who was dressed in a dark blue robe, said slowly, "Have you found the pages?" Commander Balaam lowered his head and said, "Sorry, I didn't find it." "Then why did you come back?" The Queen of Ice and Snow said coldly, "Through the Book of Gaia, I felt a violent tremor. That world seemed to be blocked." Commander Balaam had a look of fear on his face. "I don't know what happened. My progress in the page world was good, and I encountered a big event. Perhaps I was about to enter the storyline, but for some reason I was bounced back." The Queen of Ice and Snow glanced at Commander Balaam and remained silent. The temperature in the room instantly dropped by a few degrees. "If not for the fact that you are still useful, I would have left." The Queen of Ice and Snow snorted. "Forget it. Since you were expelled, you must have done something wrong by accident. It's not like it hasn't happened before. Since you're back, just focus on the matters here. You don't have to worry about searching for the pages in the future. Thank you for your understanding." Commander Balaam nodded. The ice and snow melted, and the Queen's figure disappeared. However, Commander Balaam's face turned gloomy. "After you return to the Winter Kingdom, you might really die. If you don't want to die, find a chance to escape." The words were still ringing in his ears. There was actually a page in his body, a copy of a page. Chapter 2218. It was impossible to detect anything about the page world. Let's call it the Holy Land page world for now. Balaam himself couldn't detect it. Neither could the Ice Queen, who was currently holding the Book of Gaia. It seemed that he had everything under control, but he was walking on a tightrope. Below him was a bottomless abyss. Balaam was expressionless as he walked in the ice palace. There weren't many people walking around in the cold castle, so no one noticed the strangeness of the chilly Winter Kingdom's Night Regiment commander. He came to an ice prison. There was the frozen Archangel John and many judges from the free city who participated in the Holy Maiden's ceremony. There was also a young girl. In front of the ice crystal fence, Balaam silently looked at the young girl curled up in the innermost corner. She hadn't touched the food, and she didn't even drink the water. She had been like this since she was brought out of the world of Z and brought to the chilly winter kingdom. The Ice Queen threw her into the ice prison and didn't care about her life or death, because the one who brought Remia here wasn't the Ice Queen Morrigan, but someone else. Standing here, Balaam silently pressed his chest, but there seemed to be no movement for a long time. Looks like it's not you either. He no longer paid any attention to Remia in the ice prison and left this place. However, the confusion in his eyes grew stronger because he still didn't know who the copy of the page world of the Holy Land was going to be sent to. As the price for the answer to that question, Balaam had thought of breaking this agreement because it was just a verbal agreement. But when he had such thoughts, he would die. He would really die. His instincts reacted to his body and made him tremble. It was too real. Even if it was just a verbal agreement, it had a terrifying binding force. It was beyond the power of the Holy Light Kingdom and came from a higher level of contract. The person I'm going to send is not my current collaborator. Morrigan had already appeared in front of me, but she couldn't detect the copy of the page in my body. Even the original Book of Gaia is the same. He only had this clue. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. When they arrived at the plaza of the Snow Palace, a royal knight hurried over and saluted Balaam. "Commander, we found traces of the evil princess's minions." "Tracks." Balaam subconsciously frowned. "Even tracks." "Someone claimed to have seen a dwarf near the city gate." "I understand." Balaam merely nodded in response. He didn't seem to be in high spirits. "Continue to follow up on this matter. Come back if there are any new updates." "Yes." The knights of the kingdom saluted again and quickly left. As the sun set, the entire ice palace was dyed orange red. Balaam's figure also disappeared from the palace plaza. In the Holy Land, in the floating royal castle, in a tower in the eastern region, a young maid of the palace was carrying a small lamp as she walked in front of the spiral staircase. Prince Desolate followed him silently until they reached the end of the stairs, in front of a room at the top of the tower. "Crown Prince's study." "Your Highness, we're here." The young maid turned around and said, along the way, she wanted to say her name several times so that Prince Desolate would remember her, but she was interrupted every time. "There's no sound." Prince Desolate shook his head lightly. The young maid was startled and subconsciously said, "That kind of sound only appears occasionally. Open the door." Prince Desolate nodded casually. So far, there was nothing abnormal, and she didn't sense any dangerous aura coming from the study. The young maid nodded and took out the key to open the door. Then, she waited for Prince Desolate to enter first. She lowered her head and waited outside the door. Prince Desolate didn't care about these details and directly walked into the study room. Then, this miss, which was wearing the disguise of Prince Desolate from another world's academies, instantly stood still. After a long time, the young maid couldn't help but feel confused. She couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, Desolate?" Prince Desolate still stood still, but he responded, "Is this really the Crown Prince's study?" Of course," the young maid said in surprise. Is there a problem?" Prince Desolate was silent for a moment. Finally, he shook his head and said slowly, "No problem. It shouldn't be a big problem. Come in. Tell me, where do you usually hear the sound?" The young maid suddenly felt a little nervous, but she couldn't disobey the prince's order. So, she had to walk in silently. Looking at the back of the young and beautiful maid, Prince Desolate frowned and said to himself, "What's the situation? Isn't this the boss' study? It's exactly the same. But this was the royal castle of the Holy Land. This is the place." The young maid came to a bookcase and stood there. "Usually you can hear that kind of sound around here." Prince Desolate absent-mindedness was interrupted by the maid's voice. He nodded and came to the bookcase. After thinking for a while, he said, "Have you moved this bookcase to check it?" The young maid was shocked. She quickly waved her hand and said, "How dare I touch everything here? If I'm found out, I will be executed." Prince Desolate thought for a while and said, "Okay, you go out and wait for me. I want to think about something here." The young maid had to agree, although she didn't know if Prince Desolate had a good relationship with the missing crown prince. Generally speaking, since they were brothers, there shouldn't be a big problem, right? As soon as the maid left the study and closed the door, Prince Desolate, Lady Nan quickly walked to the desk, sat on the chair, and clicked her tongue. She glanced at the desk carefully and muttered, "The layout is basically the same, but the things on the desk are obviously different. I remember that there should be a book about antiques on the left side of the boss's desk. Here, there should be a pen holder, and here is a copybook for practicing calligraphy. But why is the layout the same? Was it because it was related to the diary about the story of the sister and the brother that couldn't be told? Sound." Nan Xiaonan subconsciously raised her head and looked at the bookcase that the young maid pointed out. At this time, there was a slight sound of music slowly coming. Nan Xiaonan pondered for a while. She had never heard of this song, even after searching through all her memories. Moreover, the closer she got to the bookcase, the clearer the song became. However, there was indeed no place on the bookcase where the song could be heard. Lady Nan blinked. Lady Nan chose to push the bookcase away. She would let Prince Desolate take the blame. Anyway, Prince Desolate was obviously used to take the blame. There was nothing wrong with it. The bookcase was moved away, but the sound of music was still there. To be exact, the sound came from the wall behind the bookcase. Lady Nan put her ear to the wall and gently knocked on it. The secret compartment was found. Lady Nan rolled her eyes and quickly ran back to the front of the desk. She grabbed the white jade bookstaff on the desk and ran back to the wall and began to pry open the secret compartment with the white jade bookstaff. Is it really a music box? The secret compartment was not big, just the size of an ordinary drawer. Nan Xiaonan used the white jade bookstaff to pry the music box out little by little. She didn't put her finger in at all. Even when the music box was out, she took 2 books from the bookcase and slowly put them down on the desk. Should I open it? She was thinking about this problem. The music box was taken out, but there was nothing special about it. There seemed to be no mechanism in the secret compartment. If she had to say something, it would be that this music box was designed to make sounds even if it was not opened. But the music had stopped at this time. There must be some secret. Otherwise, why would it be hidden? Nan Xiaonan couldn't hold back her hands and stretched out her claws to the music box in front of her. But she suddenly grabbed her hands that were out of control and silently recited the formula of the word shun in her heart. Gradually, she calmed down the restlessness in her heart. Her eyes began to roll again. She already had other plans. So, Lady Nan quickly restored the study room and tore a piece of cloth from the curtain to wrap the music box. She didn't want to open it, but she could ask the maid outside to open it. Anyway, he was wearing the disguise of Prince Huang, so all the blame could be put on him. Open the door. Help me look at the box. In an instant, a warm thing directly covered her face. Her vision and the whole world seemed to have turned red in an instant. In front of her, the young maid in the palace had her throat cut. Blood sputtered on the wall, and then she fell down. Lady Nan subconsciously touched the blood on her cheek and looked at the murderer in disbelief. A white-faced man. The man was wearing a snow-white outfit. Even the hilt of the sword used to cut the maid's throat was white. Nan Xiaonan thought that she had seen countless treasures, but the snow-white sword in the white-faced man's hand was the most beautiful sword she had ever seen so far. Except for cleaning time, those who go near the crown prince's study room will die. The white-faced man slowly turned around and looked at her. Lady Nan's heart suddenly trembled, but her psychological quality had always been excellent. She directly snorted and said, "What, you want to kill me too?" The white-faced man casually waved the snow-white sword in his hand and said indifferently, "If it is Prince Huang, of course, there is no need, but you must die." He saw through it. Nan Xiaonan was suddenly shocked. That damned famine. Didn't they say that as long as they didn't go near the hall of the founder, Califar was basically safe? How could a random person see through the changes of her black soul body? Just at the moment when Lady Nan was absent-minded, the white-faced man flashed and slashed at her with his sword. Lady Nan instinctively dodged, but she didn't dodge completely. One of her arms was instantly cut off and fell to the ground. The arm that fell to the ground instantly turned into a cloud of black smoke and dissipated in the air, and didn't return to Nan Xiaonan's body. The part that was lost was truly lost forever. "Who are you?" Nan Xiaonan subconsciously cried out in alarm. She repeatedly retreated, and directly retreated into the study. "The King of Swords," the white-faced man said indifferently. "Di Jun, the King of Swords." It was said that they were the strongest force in the hands of the founder, Califar. Each of them had the horrifying strength to kill a mythical race. Nan Xiaonan only knew about this after the incident. But now she didn't know. Looking at the white-faced man, Di Jun, who slowly walked in, Nan Xiaonan felt unlucky in her heart. Why didn't they assign some small fries to her to deal with? Why didn't they assign some small fries to her to deal with? "You don't come over. If you come over, I'll shout. Don't come over." The white-faced man didn't care at all. Nan Xiaonan only felt that her whole body was shrouded by a terrible, murderous intent. She was going to die anyway. She had no way to retreat, and her body hit the bookcase. Lady Nan gritted her teeth and was about to escape through the wall directly. But she saw the white-faced man in front of her suddenly frown slightly and then disappeared in an instant again. When the white-faced man, Di Jun, appeared in front of Nan Xiaonan, the demon girl of the subworld's academic school was almost suffocated. Her brain couldn't think at all, and her body couldn't move. It turned out that in front of such a horrible guy, even escaping was a luxury. Just at the moment when Lady Nan was in despair, Di Jun moved and waved his arm. "I'm dead." "Huh. He didn't die?" At this time, Nan Xiaonan saw something that she would never forget in her life. She saw the King's Sword General, whose strength was so horrible that he could directly cut open the black soul body. At this time, not to attack her, but to catch something. A wooden ornament fell from the top of the bookcase because she knocked down the bookcase. At this time, Nan Xiaonan clearly saw this pale-faced, paralyzed guy, and unexpectedly heaved a sigh of relief. In an instant, Lady Nan grabbed a book from the bookcase and directly threw it at Di Jun. Di Jun's face changed slightly. Looking at the incoming book, he instinctively reached out and didn't attack at all. Lady Nan opened her mouth and directly grabbed several books from the bookcase directly. Profound meaning. The study room destroyer. In an instant, the books in the study room were flying all over the place. A snow-white figure was also collecting the flying books at a terrible speed. Finally, a white jade flipper flew toward him. The King's Sword General's hands were full of books at this time, so he could only open his mouth and bite it. After flipping the books, he finally stopped. However, there was no trace of Nan Xiaonan in the study. The King of Swords, Emperor Jiang, frowned and snorted lightly. He quickly put the messy books back into the bookcase one by one, straightened the things that were overturned, and put the pen holder back in its original position on the desk. He also put the wooden ornaments back on top of the bookcase. Finally, he moved a little to make the wooden ornament face the right way. Well, perfect. Chapter 2219. A maid was stripped of her clothes, knocked out, and thrown under the bed. Just like that, Lady Nan successfully transformed again and calmly walked out of a maid's room. This was the area of the floating castle, which was very far away from the tower where the Crown Prince's study was located. It was not that she didn't think of leaving the castle directly, but the castle was floating, and it would be too easy to be exposed if she floated out. Most importantly, She couldn't distract the King of Swords in midair. The best place to deal with this kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder should be a dump or something like that. For the Crown Prince's study that has been missing for several years, why is it so tightly guarded? Lady Nan took out the only thing she found. Is it possible that this music box is really something important? But if it was really that important, wouldn't it be too childish to just prevent it from being hidden in the wall behind the bookshelf? Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but shake her head. At this time, she still didn't plan to open the music box by herself before she figured out the meaning of this thing. One of her arms was cut off, and now the new arm was actually from different parts of her body. This also meant that the density of her black soul form was slightly reduced. Changing shape and turning into mist didn't have much of an effect. The main thing was that after turning into mist, her movement speed decreased. In addition, her spirit was slightly damaged, and there was also a faint pain in her testicles. But since he saw through me, why hasn't he done anything yet? It's really a little hard to get used to. Nan Xiaonan looked around in confusion. She found that at this time, there was no tense atmosphere in the palace, and there were no palace guards around to catch her. Could it be that the King of Swords hasn't reported this matter? What's that sound? It sounded like the sound of cutting wood. Cutting wood? It was indeed the sound of cutting wood. Nan Xiaonan, who had followed the sound, saw a middle-aged man cutting down a big tree in a garden. Beside him, there were already a lot of bundles of wood, as well as firewood that had already been split. Finally, the big tree finally fell under the continuous cutting of the man. At this time, the man directly inserted the axe directly into the wooden stake, sat down, and then took out a water bag to drink. "Who's there?" After the man finished drinking the water and wiped his lips, he looked at the tree trunk where Lady Nan was hiding. How could a random woodworker discover me? While muttering Miss Witch of the Academies in her sub-world walked out timidly. With a terrified expression, she slowly approached the man who was cutting down the trees. "I heard a sound, so I didn't peek. I was just very, very curious." "What are you curious about?" the man asked expressionlessly. "Haven't you seen people cut down trees before?" Nan Xiaonan thought for a while and said no. "It's just that this is the Imperial Palace and there's so much firewood. I don't think we need it." The man said indifferently, "You don't think it's necessary because the current human fire doesn't use this kind of inefficient material. However, the world's first flame was born from these woods." Lady Nan was stunned and asked subconsciously, Is it related?" "It doesn't matter." The man suddenly chuckled. "It's just a boring person who said boring words." Lady Nan thought for a while and said, "Uncle, are you the gardener here?" "You can say that." The man said rather casually, "I was punished by His Majesty here. If I can't cut down all the trees here, I can't leave the Imperial Palace." Lady Nan blinked. This forest was not big, but it was not small either. Under normal circumstances, it was not easy for a person to cut down all the trees. "Uncle, what did you do?" Nan Xiaonan's soul of gossip began to burn. "This punishment is not easy. Are you the new maid?" the man suddenly asked. Nan Xiaonan nodded and said, as if she was amazed, "Uncle, how do you know?" "If you have been here for a while, you probably know why I'm here." The man smiled. "You know who I am. Don't tell me you're also King General." Lady Nan felt that with her bad luck, it was very possible. She even began to smear oil on the soles of her feet. "Have you seen King General?" "I've seen him from afar." Nan Xiaonan said with awe, "He's the King of Swords." "Dijun?" The man nodded. "He's nothing special, but he likes to wander around the Imperial Palace. It's easy to meet him." Nan Xiaonan swallowed subconsciously and said hesitantly, "So, Uncle, are you really King General?" In this tone. "Me?" The man smiled casually and said, "I'm not King General. I'm just a guy who is familiar with Dijun and can talk with him." "I suddenly remembered that I have something to do," Nan Xiaonan said quickly. "I haven't finished today's cleaning. I have to go back." Uncle, I'll come to see you when I have time. Goodbye. Damn it. I've never pretended before. The taste of a trap was already overflowing, all right. June is outside. The man sitting on the wooden stake suddenly said, Do you really want to go out? Nan Xiaonan's body stiffened. She looked at the lumberjack in bewilderment. She saw the man take out a lunchbox and then use a knife to cut a piece of wood into a fork. Then he slowly ate the food. So, Uncle, you are? A voice in white appeared in front of Nan Xiaonan in a flash. The next moment, Lady Nan only felt that her whole body was locked by a murderous intent. The King of Swords, June. When June arrived, he just glanced at Lady Nan, who was disguised as a maid. Then he suddenly lowered his head and said respectfully, Your Majesty, this woman just His Majesty? The founder emperor, Califar. The man who was tired of lumbering? Lady Nan directly took a cold breath. Well, this could not be called bad luck. Nan Xiaonan even doubted whether she was the reincarnation of the god of misfortune or not. Fushi went out in the morning and hasn't come back yet. You go and see him. The man said, casually at this time. A trace of doubt flashed through June's eyes, but he didn't say anything. He nodded and turned around to leave. At the same time, Nan Xiaonan collapsed on the ground. The man slightly raised his head and glanced at Nan Xiaonan. First you disguised as waste and swaggered in the palace. Then you successfully escaped from June. I thought you should be full of courage. I was wrong. Nan Xiaonan instantly jumped up and then landed on her knees. She directly slid to the front of the man, raised her hands, and kowtowed. What did you do wrong? The man said indifferently, Did you do something you shouldn't have done, or take something you shouldn't have taken, or you shouldn't have come here? Nan Xiaonan didn't have time to think at this time. Her face was almost touching the ground. At this time, she was in a panic and hurriedly took out the music box from her arms. There was only silence. After a while, Nan Xiaonan quietly raised her head and saw the man looking at the music box in her hands. It seemed that he was lost in some kind of memory. It turns out that this thing has always been in his study. Judging from his tone, the founder emperor seemed to have been looking for this music box all the time. Lady Nan calmed down and said respectfully, Now it's yours, Your Majesty. I don't intend to refuse. The man casually waved his hand, and the music box floated to his hand, and directly opened it. Nan Xiaonan stared at the open music box. Except for the first sound, there was no other movement. Is it really just an ordinary music box? Here, it is indeed just an ordinary music box. There won't be anything. The man glanced at Nan Xiaonan. After all, no matter how magical the Book of Gaia is, it can't copy an item of the same level. Restoring its sound is already the limit. Oh, I see. Lady Nan nodded subconsciously. Next was Yi's performance. She was almost tongue-tied and her whole body almost exploded on the spot. You? The man said indifferently, You accompany me here and wait for your master to come. I should also see him. After all, I also have such an obligation. The man seemed to have not finished his words completely. Then his eyes turned and looked behind Nan Xiaonan. The man was a little surprised at first. Then he showed a gentle smile. You came earlier than I thought. Well, it's really not bad. It's worth pretending. After all, I can cache books and read them offline. Nan Xiaonan turned around abruptly. Her brain seemed to have exploded. She jumped up again, landed on her knees, and slid away with tears and snot. Boss, you finally came to pick me up. I missed you so much. In the forest, the King of Swords left and a black-haired young man came. Miss, Witch of the Academia in her child world, almost climbed onto the young man's thigh and hung her mouth on it, hugged the young man's leg. Lady Nan, can you leave me alone with this gentleman for a while? The young man, Luocio said with a smile. Nan Xiaonan blinked and quickly wiped the tears and snot that were squeezed out. She nodded and instantly turned into smoke and floated out of the garden. Boss Luo watched her leave, and so did Califar, the founder of the great emperor. Quite an interesting black soul. I guess your life is not too boring. My life is not boring. Boss Luo shook his head. Then how should I address you? Your Majesty, or? Up to you. Califar said in a low voice. As long as you don't use the identity of an agent, you can call me whatever you want. Then, Boss Luo thought for a while and said, Your Majesty. Califar didn't seem surprised. He just tilted his head. I can feel that the altar's restraint on you is very light. It can even be said that it's almost negligible. The royal power in your body has already awakened. These two powers temporarily don't collide in your body. It seems that you are instinctively resisting this relationship, right? I can't say so. Boss Luo shook his head. I can't say so either. Califar said, That's a pity. If you have accepted this relationship now, I will answer some of the doubts in your heart. But you don't. Then you can only find the answer yourself. It's okay. Boss Luo said indifferently. I need to find some goals for myself. Besides, even if it's from your Majesty's mouth, it might not be the truth. If possible, I don't want to be misled by preconceived notions. Misled? Califar suddenly chuckled. That's good. Even if I'm not a very responsible father, I can't kill one of the few joys of my descendants. Thank you. Boss Luo nodded. If possible, I hope that the next time I hear this sentence, it won't be in such a calm tone. Califar suddenly shook his head. However, in the world outside the Book of Gaia, I'm afraid it won't work. You can come here and take over the altar. The royal power has also been awakened, which means that the Eternal Empire really doesn't exist anymore. Boss Luo was silent for a moment before slowly saying, I should be able to bring your Majesty out. No need. Califar shook his head and said, To be honest, I enjoy life here. Besides, even if you bring me out of the Book of Gaia, I'm not the real Califar. In the end, I'm just a character in the book, a father with a child by his side. It's just that, as an emperor with a bad reputation, it's a little unsatisfactory. Boss Luo said that Mr. J doesn't seem to have a good relationship with your Majesty. It's the rebellious period. Califar laughed and said, When you have a child one day, you'll be able to experience the joy of it. Speaking of which, have you considered having children now? If I'm not wrong, in the outside world, there's probably no glorious son of the eternal royal family other than you. Boss Luo was silent. Califar shook his head and said, However, for you, there's no need to have children. As long as the inheritance of the Eternal Empire is still there, you'll still be there. Find a few people to accompany you, and you won't feel lonely. What do you mean? Luaccio couldn't help but frown. Califar smiled and said, Don't you want to be misled by preconceived notions? The answer you hear from me may be a misled one. Similarly, the answer you get from the altar is also possible, right? Boss Luo was silent again. The answer from the altar could be misled. Was it possible? What should I do? Luaccio suddenly asked. Califar was stunned and said, What? Do you still have doubts? You don't need to care about the altar anymore. Why do you still have doubts? What should you do? You can do anything. Everything is yours. Everything is yours. No one will resist you. You're God, the God of all things, the God of all timelines. You're omnipotent. Boss Luaccio showed a rare bitter smile. It sounds like a good thing that fell from the sky. This is what you deserve. Califar said faintly, the answer, whether it's for fun or as a short-term goal, it doesn't matter. You can find it yourself. Even if you don't find it, it doesn't matter. Nothing will change because you are the last executor. There will be no more. Chapter 2220. Lady Nan was leaning against a tree trunk, counting the ants on the ground and trampling the weeds on the ground from time to time. This was already the edge of the forest. Boring, boring, boring. Sorry to keep you waiting. The moment the voice appeared, Lady Nan instantly entered the zone and quickly ran up. "Boss, are we leaving now?" "Lady Nan, don't you like this place?" Boss Luo suddenly asked. Nan Xiaonan didn't dare to run away. Under normal circumstances, when the boss asked such a question, how would he expect the employee to answer? She could only try to say, "For the time being, I haven't found the page that belongs to this place. It's indeed a pity to leave now. The page is already in my hands." Boss Luo directly opened his palm, and the golden page floated. "So, you cleared the game as soon as you came? You don't have any self-awareness as a game participant." Nan Xiaonan was speechless. Boss Luo said, "I'll stay and see what happens next. You can pretend that you didn't see me and that the page isn't in my hands. Normally, you can explore this page world." Lady Nan opened her mouth in shock and said subconsciously, "What's the situation?" "I cleared the game with the modifier, but the CGs are missing. As a collector, I hope you can help me record the CGs." "What does that mean?" "I believe Lady Nan will do well." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Because Lady Nan has always given me the impression that you're very capable. I'm also very capable in other areas. My life has been bitter for nothing." Lady Witch of the Subworld immediately puffed out her chest and said, "I'll try my best to explore the ending of this page." "Don't worry, this story shouldn't be short." Boss Luo said casually, "I've closed the link to the outside world on this page. The audience in Freedom City can't see the development here. So, do you want to continue using Yulia's identity? Just do as you wish." Lady Nan was still trying to figure out her boss's intentions. She nodded and asked, "Boss, will you continue to stay here?" At this moment, Boss Luo suddenly turned around and looked at the forest behind him. He thought for a while and said, "I think I'll stay for a while, but I'm not sure how long. As for this place, I don't think I'll come back." Lady Nan also thought for a while and said, "There's one more thing. Boss, you just said to forget that you were here. Don't we need to tell Senior 11 about this?" "Not at the moment." "Why are you still here?" When the sound was heard, Lady Nan was still leaning against the tree trunk, counting the ants on the ground. From time to time, she would ravage the weeds on the ground. Lady Nan raised her head and looked at the great Emperor Califar, who was walking out with an axe and a water bag. This time, she didn't slide over and kneel down. She just straightened her clothes and stood properly. "It's quieter here. I'm thinking about what the master told me to do, Your Majesty." It was okay to say it out intuitively, because the boss said that he wouldn't come here again. The boss wouldn't see this great Emperor Creator again. Great Emperor Califar nodded and said, "Even if you find a reason to stay in the palace, it won't be of much help to what you want to do. On the contrary, if Emperor June comes back, it will be more troublesome for you. Do as you see fit." Lady Nan was stunned. In fact, from the beginning when she saw Great Emperor Califar cutting wood in the forest, she felt very incredulous. "Your Majesty," she couldn't help but ask in confusion, "you don't seem to care about what I want to do." Great Emperor Califar smiled and said, "No matter what you want to do, whether it's adding fuel to the fire or destroying the order here, in the end, it will return to its original state. Or rather, I'm looking forward to what kind of different development you can bring to this world. Just take it as adding some interesting episodes to yourself in the endless reincarnation." "Huh. I won't leave this palace," Great Emperor Califar said casually. "As long as you don't tear down this castle, there won't be a problem." Seeing Great Emperor Califar pick up the axe and leave with the water bag, Miss Nan leaned back against the tree trunk and muttered, "Why do I feel like those two fellows are saying the same thing? By the way, I'll give this back to you. Maybe it will be of some help to you." A small music box slowly flew over. Lady Nan subconsciously reached out and caught it. Great Emperor Califar had opened this thing in front of her once, and it was complete. Nan Xiaonan hesitated for a moment and finally plucked up the courage to open it slowly. The spring rotated, and in the open music box, a miniature sculpture of a woman dancing slowly rotated with the sound of music. This was all the music box could be seen after it was opened. Lady Nan put away the music box and muttered to herself after thinking for a while, "I'd better leave this place temporarily and meet with Senior 11. Speaking of which, where is Senior 11 now? In the Princess Manor, the prison. Even if you look at me like this, I won't cut off my flesh and feed it to you, okay?" Medanzo squinted and said, "The guy who was willing to cut off his flesh and feed it to the eagle last time is still single. He was forced by his believers not to harass women. I won't do that." The legendary hero of the Shadow Elves just looked at the guy in front of him expressionlessly. Guy had heard a lot of such irrelevant remarks, but it didn't help the current situation at all. He believed that after he lost his rationality again due to hunger, he would eat this nagging guy without hesitation. "Put away your little tricks," Guy said indifferently. "Even if you make a few more bone spears, they can't save you when I lose my rationality. The bones here are too fragile. They can't pierce my body." Medanzo laughed embarrassedly. He had been tirelessly breaking the bones in the cave, rubbing the broken bones to make phosphorescence, and he did make a few sharp-boned spears by the way. "Great hero, is there some kind of imprisonment on your body? Otherwise, with your strength that almost kicked the Founder Emperor to death, this kind of cage shouldn't be able to stop you, right?" Guy didn't speak, but slowly turned around. During the long imprisonment, this legendary hero was only left with a small piece of cloth wrapped around his waist. When he turned his back, there was a metal keel attached to his spine. Medanzo approached curiously and even reached out to poke the metal dragon bone a few times. "This thing limits your strength? You can't take it off?" "The dragon bone and my bones are connected together. Only a special key can open it." Guy shook his head and said, "Opening it by force will only break my bones." "Where is the key?" Medanzo asked directly. Guy looked at Medanzo like looking at an idiot. "Do you think it won't be on you?" Medanzo shrugged immediately, and when she was about to speak, she saw Guy suddenly looked up at the top of the cave and even frowned. It seemed that something was falling very fast. Soon, the falling thing fell into the cave. It was a cylinder less than the size of a palm. "What's this?" Guy muttered doubtfully. "The person guarding me shouldn't have thrown down such a strange thing." "I think I know who threw it." Medanzo chuckled at this time. She walked over and picked up the cylinder. After looking it up and down, she directly lifted the cylinder and then twisted it hard. In an instant, the unscrewed cylinder directly shot up a fireball. Guy's eyes slightly narrowed, but he didn't do anything. It didn't take long for the fireball to be extinguished. Not long after that, a rope actually dropped down from above. On the rope, a figure was sliding down at a high speed. "Young master, I finally found you." The person who was sliding down rapidly was the runner-up of the previous Holy Land swordsmanship competition, the noble Deacon Babalia. Guy still didn't say anything, and only looked at the scene in front of him suspiciously. "You're too late, Babalia." Medanzo pulled the rope hanging down at this time, and felt that it was quite stable. The noble deacon quickly said, "Young master, after you started the game with His Highness the Prince, many things happened. Later, Her Highness Angelique gave the order to execute everyone except the pure-blooded nobles. I took advantage of the chaos and avoided the capture of the royal knights. I waited until the royal knights and the purge knights left the manor before I dared to leave the hiding place. Then I started to look for you, young master. You found me." Medanzo asked curiously, "How did you find me?" Babalia said, "The key is your clothes, young master. After arriving at the Holy Land, in order to participate in this banquet, I specially prepared specially coated clothes for you, young master, in case you need them. These clothes can leave marks on the ground, and as long as you use a special lens, you can see them. I followed young master's traces all the way and found this place. In the end, I found this cave and threw down a signal flare to try. Madanzo suddenly sighed and patted Babalia's shoulder. She sighed and said, "It seems that letting you stay by Decaria's side as a servant deacon is really hard on you. If it wasn't for the old count who saved me, I would have died in the land of starvation." Babalia shook his head and said, "The old count hopes that I can help you, so I will do my best. Young master, let's not talk about this first. Let's quickly leave here. By the way, this is a great hero." Madanzo smiled and said, "Legend has it that the guy who almost kicked the founding emperor to death." At the exit of the prison, in the storage room of the manor's courtyard, Madanzo saw a female corpse. It was the corpse of an old woman. She should have died not long ago. Babalia said, "This woman has been hiding in the dark all this time, and her swordsmanship is very high. I almost died under her sword. However, other than this hidden guard, the strange thing is that there aren't many traps here." Madanzo looked at the corpse and thought for a bit. She said, "The person locked up here is an extremely vicious criminal to the government. If we set up a lot of guards and traps with great fanfare, wouldn't we be telling those mythical creatures that worship Emperor Kai that their great hero is still alive and is here? Psychological warfare. No one would think that not only is the great hero not dead, but he is also imprisoned in the basement of this storeroom." Young master's analysis is correct. Babalia nodded, his eyes filled with gratification. "What about Her Highness the Empress?" Madanzo suddenly asked. "I don't know." Babalia shook his head. "I only heard that the Sword King will come and take over the kidnapping of the prince. After that, Her Highness the Empress left. I heard that Her Highness the Empress went out with her entourage. As for where she went, I don't know. However, now is the best time to escape. Without Her Highness, the security here will be lower." Madanzo narrowed her eyes and said, "Of course we have to leave, but before we leave, we have to collect some interest." "Interest? I'm the kind of person who will repay kindness." A maid of the manor was carrying a bucket and a cloth, walking into Her Highness the Empress' study room and started her daily cleaning work. Then, just as she opened the door of the study room, the bucket in the maid's hand fell to the ground. The water wet the maid's shoes. She didn't care about this, and after being dumbfounded for a few seconds, she immediately screamed, "It's gone or it's all broken." All kinds of annihilator weapons collected by Her Highness Angelique in this place. There was even a long-range annihilator that was custom-made not long ago. This was the collection that Her Highness Angelique was most satisfied with recently. Someone. What, do you still have doubts? You don't need to care about the altar, so why do you still have doubts? What should you do? You can do anything. Everything is yours. Everything is yours. No one will go against you. You are God, the God of all things, the God of all timelines. You are omnipotent. That is the high ground where you can overlook the entire Holy Land. Luaccio looked at everything in this seemingly right but actually wrong world. The sound of the wind, vaguely, sounded like the voice of the land of Califar. It doesn't matter if the answer is for fun or as a short-term goal. You can find it yourself. It doesn't matter if you don't find it. Nothing will change because you are the last executor. There won't be any more. The last words before leaving. If you really want to make things difficult for yourself, then think about a problem. The sound of the wind gradually stopped. Think about it carefully. For everything, is it really necessary to have a God who can control everything? The only thing to consider is, Boss Luo gradually lost his mind, the necessity of existence. The wind stopped. That's a bit powerful. Shaking his head, Boss Luo slowly exhaled and said softly, "Sure enough, as long as there is subjective thinking, there will still be preconceived ideas. Your Majesty." "Father!" After a moment of absent-mindedness, Boss Luo suddenly focused his eyes and said calmly, "I only have one father." As he spoke, Boss Luo waved his hand, and a golden page floated in front of him. When the page that belonged to this page world appeared, a large number of pages appeared at the same time beside it. However, these pages were only shadows and didn't have a physical body. When the only real page and the many shadows of the pages began to overlap, an unreal Book of Gaia fell into Boss Luo's hands. All worlds accelerate. End of chapter. Chapter 22-21. It was as if there was a clock slowly rising into the night sky, and then it began to rotate rapidly. Day and night also alternated rapidly at the same time. Finally, the clock slowly fell and finally disappeared. She woke up with a start. The Queen of Cold Winter suddenly opened her eyes from her nap. Confusion flashed in her eyes, and then she was shocked. The Book of Gaia appeared, and the Queen of Cold Winter quickly opened it. It was as if many worlds were opened at once, and these worlds were developing rapidly. The Queen of Cold Winter tried to stop this fast-forwarding, but the Book of Gaia seemed to have entered an autonomous mode. It was in her hands, but it was not under her control. What is this? The Queen of Winter abruptly stood up, but a greater shock followed. She was momentarily at a loss as to what to do. Her pregnancy had disappeared, a flat lower abdomen with almost no trace of excess fat. The Queen of Cold Winter couldn't help but frown. She almost thought that she had fallen into some kind of dream unknowingly. But at this moment, a delicate figure directly broke into the ice and snow hall. It was a young girl in her prime, pure and flawless. The young girl cheerfully came to the Queen of Cold Winter. "Mother, good afternoon." "Mother?" The Queen of Cold Winter was slightly startled. She had seen this young girl in front of her too many times. The Queen of Cold Winter subconsciously sat back on the throne, rubbing her forehead gently to clear her thoughts at this time. But the young girl in the hall saw this and approached with concern. "Mother, what's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well?" "By Shua." The Queen of Cold Winter calmed down and called tentatively. The young girl blinked and immediately showed a smile. "Mother, you haven't called me by my nickname for a long time. What's wrong today?" "I'm fine." The Queen of Cold Winter shook her head. "Maybe I'm a little tired from dealing with state affairs. I'll be fine after some rest." "Mother, let me massage your shoulders?" the young girl said enthusiastically. The Queen of Cold Winter waved her hand and said, "No need, but I'm a little hungry. Can you help me get some food, my princess?" "Okay, I'll go right away." The young girl was like a joyful traveler. When she was here, the entire cold hall seemed to be filled with the aura of spring. But when she left, the cold and gloomy atmosphere returned. The austere queen remained seated on her throne, muttering to herself. Suddenly, she turned to look at the dark corner beneath her throne and frowned. "Bellum, how long have you been here?" A tall figure walked out from the dark. It was the commander of the Winter Kingdom's knights. From the looks of it, Her Majesty seems to have just experienced all of this. Commander Ballum looked thoughtfully in the direction the young lady had left and said solemnly, "Time has jumped by at least 15 years. When did you find out?" The Winter Queen asked with a frown. "All of a sudden." Ballum smiled bitterly. "Can you believe it? I was eating, and everything around me was moving forward with a terrible speed, and then it stopped. More than 10 years had passed in the blink of an eye. I thought you used the acceleration function, but now it seems more than 10 years have passed. Even Bai Shue has been born." The Queen of Chilly Winter muttered softly, "Ballum, what's the situation in the Chilly Winter Kingdom now?" "Get to know it on the way." Ballum said solemnly, "The situation is a bit bad. Currently, the Chilly Winter Kingdom is preparing to start a war with the neighboring country. The fuse is the prince that the witch princess hanged on her wedding night." The Queen of Chilly Winter nodded. "The crown prince of the other country died tragically, and it was expected to start a war. But why is it delayed until now? Why did it fast forward more than 10 years? Balaam said, "The reason why the Chilly Winter Kingdom has always been peaceful is that there has always been a blizzard shrouding the entire country. It is like a natural barrier blocking all foreign invaders. But now, the blizzard outside has ushered in a once-in-a-century pause. The blizzard stopped. The Queen of Chilly Winter couldn't help but ponder. Now that the world suddenly accelerated, almost disrupting all the previous arrangements, Balaam frowned and said, "Your Majesty, facing the unknown, I'm afraid it's no longer appropriate for us to continue with the original arrangements." The Queen of Chilly Winter couldn't help but frown. Although it wasn't to the extent of being confused, she was really at a loss. It was the kind of embarrassment where everything suddenly changed from being in control to being unfamiliar. "I need to regain control of everything in the Chilly Winter Kingdom," the Queen of Chilly Winter said in a deep voice, "as soon as possible." They were still discussing countermeasures, but the Ice and Snow Hall once again welcomed an intruder. It was a minister of Chilly Winter who was in charge of diplomatic affairs. "Your Majesty, the envoy from the neighboring country has arrived. When can we meet him?" The Minister of Foreign Affairs stood humbly, but the Queen and Balaam looked at each other in confusion. "The envoy from the neighboring country?" The Queen frowned and said, "Since the war is about to start, why would the envoy come?" The minister was startled, showing a stunned expression, but he still said slowly, "Your Majesty, after all, it is not an easy thing to start a war between the two countries." This time, the envoy from the neighboring country came, hoping that we can hand over the princess who committed treason and bring her back. I privately think that if the negotiation is successful, there is a great chance to avoid a war between the two countries. The Queen of Chilly Winter pondered for a moment. "Who is the envoy?" "It is the new crown prince of the neighboring country. It is rumored that he is a very beloved prince and is approachable. He also wants to stop the war between the two countries, so he took the initiative to volunteer as an envoy and come to our Chilly Winter Kingdom." The Queen of Chilly Winter thought for a moment and said, "Since the envoy has come in order to show the ceremony, we naturally can't meet him immediately. You arrange for the envoy to stay first and prepare for a formal meeting. You can leave first. I still have something to discuss with Balaam." The Queen's response seemed to be within the minister's expectations, so he didn't say much and quickly went to deal with the matter. The cold hall fell into silence. "Your Majesty, there are too many variables, but we don't have many clues about the Winter World's pages. Don't you think we should use a more direct approach?" Balaam's voice suddenly sounded. "No," the Queen of Chilly Winter said with fear. "The world suddenly accelerated, and the reason is unknown. If we suddenly use destructive means at this time, I am afraid there will be more problems, maybe? The Queen of Chilly Winter was silent for a moment. "Maybe we use destructive means to collect too many pages, which led to this drastic change. Maybe this is some kind of signal sent by the Book of Gaia. This was a conjecture, but it wasn't the main reason. The more important reason was that in the final page world of Z, she used destructive means to force the pages to reveal themselves. In the end, it led to her death. Some page worlds were not a problem if they were destroyed, but some page worlds were destroyed, which might lead to eternal damnation. As it was the first time she encountered such a thing in the final page world of..." The Queen of Chilly Winter still had lingering fears. "And I have a hunch," the Queen of Chilly Winter said coldly. "The prince of the neighboring country may be the one I have been waiting for." Balaam pondered for a moment and said firmly, "Your Majesty, please rest assured. I will get the information about Chilly Winter as soon as possible." Dwarves were a species that had a lifespan that far exceeded that of humans. At least, all the dwarves she had encountered in the past were so. So even if more than a decade had passed, the 7 bearded dwarven brothers didn't change much. In a manner, in the Chilly Winter Kingdom, the 7 bearded dwarven brothers were all here, including the second brother who was supposed to be used as a bait to lure the guards away. She looked at the 7 dwarven brothers who were drinking and having fun with a blank expression and fell into silent contemplation. The time jump and the sudden change of scenery were not unacceptable. What was unacceptable was that after more than a decade, these 7 dwarves didn't make any progress. Could it be that in the past 10 years or so, he had never once made a move to teach these 7 fellows a lesson? Or was it just a simple jump in the background story? The world was fast-forwarded in a state of being seized in the calculation, so there was no subjective component. She was used to straightening out the logic first, before proceeding to the next step. But this kind of sudden time jump was very illogical in itself. Obviously, it is very abnormal to only consider the chilly winter kingdom. She pondered and said, "But if you consider the means outside the chilly winter kingdom, it is much more reasonable. Did the master make a move? Or, by the way, your Royal Highness, we have prepared the things you want for you. When are you going to act?" The bearded dwarf's eldest brother stood up and asked with a flushed face. She slowly gave him a question mark in her eyes. The bearded dwarf's eldest brother said excitedly, 10 dirty prostitutes and 100 wild boar hearts. Your Royal Highness, didn't you want us to prepare for you? What vicious witchcraft are you going to use to curse Snow White this time? She was silent, then said calmly, "Have I cursed many times?" "I know this." The bearded dwarf's second brother also stood up at this time and counted with his fingers. 7, no, it's 9 times. None of them succeeded. Ha 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 ha. Your Royal Highness, you are really the fate of the idiot villain in the novel. You can always save Snow White from danger. Her Royal Highness, the Witch Princess, stood up without saying a word. She directly put on a cloak to cover her head, then pushed open the door and walked out. "Princess, where are you going?" There was no answer, only the sound of the door closing. The 7 bearded dwarf brothers looked at each other at this time. After a while, everyone touched the quilt again. The third brother suddenly said at this time, "Did you notice that the princess looked at us with disgust? Isn't it always like this? What's the problem? It's not a big problem, but it wasn't like this in the past. She even scolded us, but she doesn't scold us now. You say our princess's curse failed every time. Why don't we just kidnap Snow White and bring her back? Then treat her to big mushrooms." Okay. Treat her to big mushrooms. Toast, toast, enjoy, enjoy. After drinking and eating to their heart's content, the 7 bearded dwarven brothers ran out of the manor in high spirits, singing all the way. In short, as long as they were happy. So that's how it is. She used more than 10 years to change her appearance in King City and run a winery. While accumulating wealth, she secretly collected information about the kingdom and prepared to launch another coup. This seems like what this identity would do. After leaving the manor, she casually walked on the streets of King City and found that many properties in King City had the same symbol secretly printed. That was the symbol of her current identity, the rich Madame Dark. She still used the identity of Jeanne d'Arc. But this efficiency is too low. She shook her head and muttered, "It seems that the level of the world's deduction ability is not high. Move aside, move aside, move aside quickly." On the street, a fast horse galloped, causing the pedestrians on the road to move aside as if to clear the obstacles on the road. In the distance, a group of carriages was slowly driving into the main road of King City. She stood in the crowd and quietly listened to the discussions. "I heard that this time it is the prince of the neighboring country. He is here to negotiate. Is there really going to be a war? Now that the blizzard has stopped, if the other side really attacks, I don't know if we can withstand it. I heard that the prince of the neighboring country is conservative and doesn't seem to support war. That is hard to say. After all, the witch killed the prince of the neighboring country with her own hands. If it wasn't for the blizzard, the war would have been over long ago. All these years, the witch hasn't been caught. I think the visit of the neighboring country this time is for the witch. I don't know how our queen will deal with it, sigh." In the midst of the discussions, the carriages slowly drove past. In the lead was a group of well-equipped cavalry. The prince of the neighboring country was in the carriage. The crowd gradually quieted down. She frowned in the crowd and quietly flicked her finger. A black butterfly silently flew out. The butterfly startled the horse, pulling the carriage. The horse was frightened, and in an instant the carriage lost control and rushed toward the crowd on the side of the road. Everyone was shocked. Seeing that it was too late to dodge, they saw a figure rush out of the carriage and directly sit on the back of the frightened horse. His Royal Highness of the neighboring country. The prince of the neighboring country bent down at this time and put his palm on the back of the horse and stroked it gently. He seemed to be saying something to the frightened horse, but in an instant the frightened horse calmed down. Legend has it that the prince of the neighboring country was the favorite of nature. Even the elves in the atmosphere loved him and obeyed his command. Seeing it today, it was indeed magical. Everyone was amazed. After calming the frightened horse, the prince of the neighboring country directly turned over and dismounted. After nodding to the diplomatic officials of the chilly winter country who led the way, he returned to the carriage again. The carriages continued to drive and gradually went away. The crowd began to disperse. Only she still stood in the same place, looking at the shrinking carriage in confusion. "It's not master," she whispered to herself in a firm tone. She pondered. Then she followed in the direction of the carriage. End of this chapter. Chapter 22. The neighboring country was the opposite of the Winter Kingdom. It was like a simple setting in a fairy tale. It was a country with spring all year round. It was a country of early spring. Then, if there is anything you need, just order the servants here. I will also arrange an audience with Her Majesty as soon as possible. In the guest house where the Prince of the Spring Kingdom was received, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Winter was bidding farewell to the Prince of the Spring Kingdom. "Kaz, go and send this lord off." The Prince of the Spring Kingdom ordered. A guy wearing huge armor and covered tightly walked out slowly. The Minister of Winter was almost shrouded in the shadow of this huge armor. The huge sense of oppression made him secretly exclaim, "The warriors of the Spring Kingdom are really brave. Ha ha ha, goodbye." The guest house was not big, but it was quiet. The century-long blizzard of winter ushered in a short pause, and people also saw the legendary blue and clear sky. This was a pure white country. It was so white that people could hardly open their eyes, especially under the sun. The Prince of the Spring Kingdom was playing an emerald green zither in the courtyard. It was unknown when it started, but small snow-white glimmering balls appeared in the corridor of the courtyard. It was the snow elves who came for the sound of the zither, until a burst of loud footsteps interrupted this beautiful scene. A huge armor came to the Prince of the Spring Kingdom at this time. "Your Royal Highness, the Minister of Winter has left, but looking at the situation, he should be back soon." His Royal Highness leaned on the doorpost and stroked the strings of the zither with his fingers. "So, do you think he is the pro-war faction?" "I'm afraid not." Kez thought for a moment and said, "After entering the Winter Kingdom, we found that the Winter people's desire to go to war is not high. As far as I know, the one who really wants to go to war in the Winter Kingdom should be the leader of the Winter Knights, Balam. According to the intelligence in recent years, Balam has expanded the knights under his command a lot." His Royal Highness stopped and let out a long sigh. "Speaking of which, the voices of revenge in the Kingdom of Spring are getting rowdy." Kez said in a deep voice, "More than 10 years have passed. The blizzard can no longer stop our anger. If winter doesn't give us an explanation, we can only use blood to judge everything." Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Suddenly, an arrow was shot from afar. The speed of the arrow was extremely fast. When Kaz reacted, he could only watch the arrow piercing into the floor. It was so close to hitting His Royal Highness. "Men, protect His Highness." As the strongest guardian of the prince, Kaz was instantly enraged. His heavy iron armor was like nothing. He jumped over the wall in a flash and rushed in the direction of the arrow. In an instant, Several soldiers from the country of spring rushed into the courtyard, protecting the prince. His Royal Highness didn't have much of a frightened expression on his face. He just looked thoughtfully at the arrow stuck in the ground. He reached out and pulled out the arrow. After looking at it carefully, he handed it to a soldier beside him. Investigate and see if you can find it in the direction of the arrowhead production. Cold winter doesn't produce ironware, and the ironware circulating in the market should be controlled goods. Understood. Go and get Kaz. His Royal Highness ordered again. You can also leave, I'm fine. The elves here will also protect me. The soldiers hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. Then this subordinate will wait outside the courtyard. His Royal Highness didn't insist and nodded with a smile. The courtyard quickly returned to its original tranquility. His Royal Highness began to leisurely boil snow water, preparing to brew tea. He poured a cup for himself and another cup for the empty space across the coffee table. My guard should be back soon. Don't you want to sit for a while? His Royal Highness said indifferently. In an instant, hundreds and thousands of black butterflies gathered, and finally a beautiful girl appeared in front of the prince of the country of spring. In fact, the girl's appearance wasn't really unparalleled. That beauty came from the girl's dreamy aura. The prince of the kingdom of spring looked at her. As he looked at her, his mind seemed to wander. He subconsciously asked, "Have we met somewhere before?" The girl didn't say anything. The girl looked at him, and her eyes were like ice that hadn't melted in 100 years in a snowstorm. There seemed to be a biting, cold, murderous intent, but she was doing her best to restrain it. "Why do you want to kill me?" The prince of the country of spring frowned. "But why didn't you kill me just now?" The girl said indifferently, "You look like someone." His Royal Highness was speechless, stunned just because of that. The girl said expressionlessly, "I won't allow anyone to offend him. It's even more impossible to look like him. It's really unexpectedly domineering." His Royal Highness opened his mouth slightly and said with a bitter smile, "It's just that appearance is one of the few things I can't control. Of course, I definitely don't mean to offend the person you're talking about. So, miss, why didn't you kill me?" The girl said indifferently again, "It's also because you look like someone." His Royal Highness nodded thoughtfully and then said helplessly, "It's the first time we've met. But just this meeting made me feel a little envious and jealous of someone I've never met before. It's really enviable, that person who looks like—" "Yep, that person who looks like me." "Keep your life for now," the girl said indifferently, "until I figure out who you are." "Thank you very much." His Royal Highness smiled, but it seemed like he didn't take the girl's words to heart. "Also," the girl said indifferently again, "please restrain yourself and don't have too much contact with the opposite sex." His Royal Highness couldn't react at that time, and he couldn't help but blink his eyes. The girl said, "Do you understand?" There was an irresistible sense of oppression, and it was as if there was a huge and pale face of an evil spirit floating behind the girl. The prince of the kingdom of spring gulped reflexively. What was going on with this resentful gaze? "I still haven't asked for your name." "Mississippi," His Royal Highness asked softly. The black-robed girl narrowed her eyes and suddenly smiled like 100 flowers blooming. "Didn't you come for me?" "You're—" The prince of the country of spring was stunned, and he subconsciously blurted out, "The Witch of Cold Winter!" "Your Royal Highness." At the same time, the door was forcefully pushed open, and a rough voice could be heard. The strongest guard, Kaz, had returned. The prince of the spring country reflexively looked over, but when he looked back again, the mysterious black-robed girl had already disappeared without a trace. The prince of the country of spring couldn't help but slowly sigh and looked out the window in silence, as if he had lost his mind. The guard in front of the door, Kaz, scratched his head in confusion. "Your Royal Highness, did I do something wrong?" "You." The prince shook his head, picked up the zither again, and slowly played. In the blink of an eye, the snow elves who were hiding in fear gathered around the prince again. They were like small animals attracted by the beauty of the forest. She listened to the faint sound of the zither in the wind, and her eyes fluctuated. Really, it's too similar, she muttered to herself. She was born with the blessings of the whole country, and everyone loved her. She was like a warm wind blowing into the country that had been frozen for 100 years. No one was willing to hurt her, and they always wanted to protect everything about her from the bottom of their hearts. She was a pure princess born in the snow. Princess, did you come to buy vegetables again today? Look at my meat. I just hunted a wild boar today. Princess, it's not good to eat meat every day. Come to my place. I saved the best eggplant for you. It's very useful. They all knew her identity, even if she wore ordinary clothes like ordinary people, used a headscarf to wrap her long hair, and carried a basket to buy vegetables. She looked like a young girl milking cows in a ranch. Of course, a guard was still necessary, but it was only an old veteran who existed purely as a porter, a guard with the head of a Qingtian doll. Your Royal Highness, I bought a lot. Is it enough? Yes. I still want to shop a bit more. She picked out the food from the stall and chatted with the stall owner while replying to the guard behind her. Mother's appetite hasn't been very good recently, and she didn't eat anything today. I want to see if I can make some special dishes. The guard thought for a moment and said, Maybe it's because of the matter with the emissary of the Kingdom of Spring. I heard that the emissary of the Kingdom of Spring has already checked into the inn today. Qingtian, is there really going to be a war? The girl asked worriedly. That's hard to say. The Qingtian guard shook his head. There are voices on both sides that want to go to war and that want to make peace. The key is still to see the final attitude of the Kingdom of Spring. As expected, it's because of that matter with elder sister. The girl lowered her head sadly. Qingtian, what kind of person do you think elder sister is? Is she really like mother? Like what they said, she killed father, her fiancé, and even betrayed Chilly Winter. That's not an era that people want to remember. The Qingtian guard shook his head and said, Your Highness, you weren't born yet at that time, so you didn't experience all that pain and fear. It's best if you don't ask too much about the first princess. Yes. The girl didn't force him and only nodded obediently. Oh, I forgot to buy some spices. It's still a long way from here to the spice shop. The Qingtian guard thought for a moment and said, Your Highness, I'll go buy some. You haven't finished shopping here, have you? Hurry up. Fresh mushrooms. Big and fragrant mushrooms. Come and see. Cheap and delicious mushrooms. At the entrance of the alley, the girl stopped with her basket and looked at the colorful mushrooms on the ground. She couldn't help but blink. Boss, are these mushrooms poisonous? The boss looked very short, had a big beard, and covered his face with a hat. Hearing this, the bearded boss who sold mushrooms quickly said, How can it be? These are all freshly picked. It's a new variety. Our village eats this. Ah, I remember now. The girl blinked at this time and said, Aren't you the boss who sold me apples last time? Last time? I didn't. It's not me. The bearded boss quickly shook his head. Oh, you saw it. It must be my brother. It looks like me. So that's how it is. The girl nodded. The apples I bought last time were very good. I used them to make apple pie for my mother. But I don't know if it was because my mother ate too much. She said that her stomach was uncomfortable all night. I was wondering why she didn't die from the poison. It turned out that the Winter Queen ate it all. It was the same last time, and the time before that, and the time before that. Can't poison her to death? Harley? Then you must try these big mushrooms. They were also picked from the place where I picked the apples last time. The bearded boss said quickly. Okay then. The girl smiled happily. Well, give me a share. I can't take all of them. Good things should be shared with everyone. It's good to be able to sell them. Everyone. The girl stood up at this time. There is a new variety of mushrooms here. It looks delicious. You guys should come and take a look as well. This boss hasn't opened for a day. He's so pitiful. Everyone should help each other. Hey, it's the princess. It's really the princess. Since the princess said so, well, I'll take a look too. In front of the stall at the entrance of the alley, more than a dozen people came in an instant. There were men and women, and even children. Everyone gathered in front of the stall and looked at the colorful mushrooms in amazement. Then they frowned and looked at the bearded boss at the stall. The bearded boss lowered his head at this time and suddenly felt cold in his hands and feet. What the F asterisk CK? Aya, princess, where did you buy the potatoes in the basket? They look very fresh. A middle-aged woman pulled the girl and asked. The girl pointed in a direction and answered patiently. The middle-aged woman continued to ask questions, and the girl still answered patiently. Thank you so much, Your Highness. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to buy such good potatoes. I'll go now. You can continue with your business. The middle-aged woman smiled and left. The young girl waved her hand to send her off. She watched the Annie walk into the crowd before turning around. However, she saw that the stall at the entrance of the alley had disappeared. The bearded boss had also disappeared. Only a few uncles and aunties were still standing at the entrance of the alley. Hey, where's the boss just now? Oh, we bought all his mushrooms, so he went back. A middle-aged man said with a smile. Sorry, princess. I forgot to leave some for you. How about you take mine? No need. The girl shook her head. I'll buy more next time. The girl smiled sweetly and said goodbye to the others. Then she turned around and left. Not far away, the Qingtian guard was coming back with a handful of spices. Stop, stop! Don't come here! Don't come here! In the alley, the bearded boss fell on the ground and saw stars. He had just experienced a storm of punches and kicks. Damn it! How dare you sell poisonous mushrooms to our princess? Don't you know this street is under my protection? Only a kind-hearted person like the princess will believe you. But you want to tarnish her angelic kindness. Come on, beat this bastard to death. Don't come here. Punches and kicks, humph and ha-ha. Qingtian, today's harvest is very good. Then go back quickly. The queen will be very happy to know that you specially prepared dinner for her. The Qingtian guard turned around and smiled. The smile suddenly froze. At this moment, the girl fell to the ground silently. Fairski! S expression changed slightly. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared beside him. At the same time, a heavy blow struck the back of his head. His eyes instantly turned black and he fell down. Okay, take her back.